think you really need to seek where it is you actually stand, and where the meaning that you're seeking, where that lies, and where it takes you.
As the blanket term, respect, meaning to not just outright offend for the sake of offending. Do you respect gay, trans, etc. people as a whole, as a people?
Absolutely. Like, oh, if I say anything, even if I don't completely agree with everything, I'm gonna get dogpiled on. I'm gonna get called a bunch of slurs. I'm gonna be slandered, and that's not an okay way to run a community.
Markinator, hello.
Hello, hello.
As if we haven't been talking for the last 15 minutes.
Officially talking now.
um, so I wanted to jump on call with you, have a conversation, and kind of go over everything that's been happening in the community, and more or less what the community is has for questions, and kind of fully try and fully understand the scope of where you're at, what the community believes versus what the truth of what you really believe, and kind of bridge that gap to understand if to help myself and other people understand exactly where you're coming from, and for hopefully you to understand where they're coming from at the same time and make sure everybody's on the same page about what your intentions and beliefs are for the community as a whole. Um,
Yeah,
you've
absolutely.
been in the you've been in the community for a while, and really uh, it's really disheartening that you've been shut out so quickly. Um, and I'm hopeful that through conversation and understanding from everybody, on all sides, we can kind of heal some, and maybe get back to having a fully inclusive community, um, where everybody wants everybody to be there. And I believe, otherwise we wouldn't be talking, that you want the same thing.
Yeah, of course. I'm not here to step on anybody. Just we're all here to play Mario at the end of the day, so that's what I would like to get back to, and have fun with that, and not necessarily harp on everyone's personal beliefs.
Fair.
But yeah, I mean, let's
Okay.
get into it.
Okay. So I don't think we need to rehash. Anyone who's watching this knows what the inciting thing was. So instead we can just start. And I have created a document which I have shared with you, so you're welcome to follow along. Start at the top. I went through and I pulled all of the questions from the community on your post with the video, the original video. Joker's post where he asked for questions from the community to ask you, that I don't know that all of them got covered. And then I only found one thing in the YouTube comments that was worth talking about. Um, there were quite a few comments, and I guess I'll just address this early, that maybe weren't constructive,
To say the least.
and weren't in my opinion aren't worth talking about. I think they said what they said, and um, I don't think they add value to a conversation. So um, we won't obviously be addressing those. Instead, we'll address ones that are actual questions and people seeking to understand, so that you can clarify your position, and then they can make an informed decision versus a decision that I think is based off of a lot of assumptions and inferences.
Sure. And I think it's worth mentioning briefly about those YouTube comments, about how they're not just unconstructive. They're pretty hateful and name calling, and asserting one's own beliefs over someone else's. So that'll come up during the conversation. But yeah, definitely don't want to harp on those types of people.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there were definitely some mean things and some things that were hateful, and I think that they come from a place of trying to be supportive of people, and they come from a place of big emotions. And when we have big emotions, it's hard sometimes to think logically, and take the time to say, is this worth even putting out there? I don't like putting negativity out into the world. I think there's enough of it. And the only way to beat that is with positivity. But um, when people feel strongly about a thing, they want to show fierce support and show and banned against things that they think are hateful. So I understand why somebody might do it, but I don't think it's appropriate or constructive in any way. So those are my thoughts on those types of posts. Um, but I can see if they were directed at me, feeling a lot more harshly about them because it's very hurtful coming from a community that you care about.
It is
Uh,
definitely.
all right, let's start with what I think is the most straightforward question, and it comes from ZC Beard. Hey, Mark, would you mind clarifying your feelings on both trans individuals and the LGBTQIA plus community as a whole? I'm not sure if I'm reading these messages correctly.
Yeah. I mean, that was just during the original Twitter conversation where I was just stating that the Bible doesn't teach that these things are acceptable in the eyes of God, and the
Hmm.
original tweet was to say that it basically was the original one I commented on. And so, basically that would get extrapolated to, if you're not in total agreement, what is your position? And my position is that, you have the free will to do whatever you want to do. But to say that it's condoned by God is a completely other issue. And the fact that people want it to be, I think, speaks to a certain degree, just about wanting to be accepted and whatnot. And if they don't feel accepted, then they could feel hurt. They could feel, somewhat exiled. But I think it goes both ways. I mean, my views aren't. They seem to be very unacceptable to people, and I don't feel like I'm going to be in any worse position physically or mentally after this. I'm very confident in who I am and what I stand for, and my understanding of God and my relationship with Him. So, my whole stance is, you can do what you want. That's the free will that God gave you to do. But to say that this stuff is condoned by God is completely another issue. So that's what I was defending on Twitter.
Okay. And taking out the, context of how that question came about, can you clarify your personal feelings on trans individuals and the inclusive community as a whole, the LGBTQIA plus?
You have to be more specific. My feelings about them as a whole.
Yes. What are your feelings on trans individuals?
I mean, they're people just like I'm people, and they have their
Hmm.
own views and way of life just like I do, and we can put those aside to play Mario, I believe, which I've done for the last 3 to 4 years, and that's I don't think it has to go any further than that. If you want to have a conversation about morality, right and wrong, what God would condone, what He wouldn't condone, that we could. I'm willing to have those conversations, but I don't think that has to get in the way of us playing Mario and being friends.
Hmm. So there's no resentment, no hate, no out negative feelings, it sounds like, at all, regarding them directly, taking, not talking about how your religion plays into that.
No, there's no hatred. There's no anything like that.
Okay.
And I've never expressed that. I tried to make that really clear in the video that I don't harbor any hatred. Even after I lost my position, you could say, in the community, I still don't harbor any hatred. It's not what I'm about. So
Fantastic. Okay. Philly asks, I'm a believer, or says, I'm a believer in God. I'm a Catholic. I don't believe God would frown upon me for respecting people for being who they are. If you are trans and go by certain pronouns, I will respect that. This is my personal belief, and if you call me a fake Catholic, you're the problem. To which you responded, I guess Catholics don't teach about Sodom and Gomorrah anymore. Um, would you care to comment on that exchange?
sure. And this was a few comments in. You know, there's a few things to unpack here. Believer in God. I'm a Catholic. To believe God would frown upon me for respecting people for being who they are. You're gonna have to define that a little bit more.
How
who
can
who
you extrapolate on that? What do you mean by that?
yeah, as far as like who people are, as Christians, as people who believe in the Bible, we are creatures created by God. We are souls who ultimately, when we engage in activities that lead away from God, that makes us unclean and leads to detriment to our spirits and our bodies. And so to say that, and this stuff is not condoned in the Bible. I could bring up examples about where this stuff is not, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not just that one passage. It's not that one story. It's actually referenced as well in the Old Testament. But it said that these people chose to act in a certain way, therefore they incurred the wrath of God. And then for Philly to invoke, I'm a believer in God, he wouldn't frown upon me respecting people who act that way. That's not cohesive. And that's why I brought up, I could have done it in a better way. I didn't expect the conversation to blow up like this. I expected this to be towards the end, because Philly is basically making an end statement here. If you're gonna try to end the conversation, this is kind of an ending statement you would make, and so I just kind of brought that up, and would think it might have incurred like one or two more comments, but clearly it's a lot more than that. But if you go by certain pronouns, I'll respect that as my personal belief. Call me a fake Catholic, that's your problem. I never called him a fake Catholic. He tried to invoke that a couple of times, and I was like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to quote scripture. I'm trying to, like, you call yourself a Catholic, and Catholics are supposed to follow scripture. I'm invoking some scripture that kind of go against what you're saying, and then he's trying to tell me that I'm calling him a fake Catholic. But it's his viewpoint on this is what's incohesive, and I'm kind of being portrayed as somebody who's like forcing it that way, but I'm just bringing up what you're supposed to be referencing yourself as a Catholic. Are there any other questions about this?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
First off, I think, and we've had this conversation privately, I think our understandings of Sodom and Gomorrah as a story are very different. And I think those who bring that up as an anti-trans, trans is like, there's 0% to do with that, but anti-LGBTQIA plus as a whole, I think it's commonly used to say as an example of like anti-homosexuality. And I don't think that's what that story is about. And
It's about
I
all
think it
sorts
gets
of
into
immorality, but yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yes, absolutely. But it's never specifically said what those immoralities are. So
Everything.
like people,
Says,
but people don't use it for everything, right? The only times I ever see Sodom and Gomorrah get brought up are when they're talking about homosexuality. People don't bring it up when they talk about adultery. People don't bring it up when they talk about cutting squaring your beard.
Sure. I mean,
or rape, which is what I think it's really about.
That is certainly in there, but it's like an all-encompassing thing. So the people of those places go. There's nothing that they follow that God condones. They go against everything that God condones, which it gets brought up that way because most people will talk about how there's nothing about not condoning. It's okay to be gay. There's nothing in the Bible that goes against that. And that's kind of a story that does go against it, and a pretty blatant one about incurring the wrath of God. It doesn't necessarily say these people were gay, therefore they incurred the wrath of God. It says that nothing that they do invokes righteousness. Nothing that they do is within the bounds that God has condoned. And part of what God has condoned is sexual morality, which is sex within marriage, sex between a man and a woman, and that is clear in the Old and New Testament. Anything outside of marital sex between a man and a woman is considered sexual immorality, and there's really no way around that. And they are like, when the people come up to Lot and the two angels at Lot's house, and they come up to the door, They demand to have sex with the two visitors, the two angels, and is presumed that these are men demanding this. So that is invoking uh, homosexuality, but also you could see that as rape and but you could a bunch of different things.
But to me, like, let's say those angels were women, or those angels were um nothing. They were angels that defied gender classification, and they said the same thing. I think the story would be the same and hold the same weight. I think the fact that it was men attempting to rape other men is irrelevant to the story as a whole, and is kind of taking something that people believe is an immoral thing in for their own reasons and putting it into that spot and saying, here's an example, when at no point was it ever stated that that was the reason.
Right. It's a very quick story. Not a whole lot of specifics are
Mm-hmm.
given in that story, which is why I say that nothing they were doing was condoned by God. They were not following what God had condoned, and God condones marriage between man and a woman. That is what God condones. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so
Okay,
I
we
don't
can get
know.
back to that
Yeah,
because
I
I
don't know
think
how you
there's
go
other things that
further.
touch on it. But
Sure.
we can get back to that. So when you're saying this, it's a very curt response. I don't think it was a good response, and it sounds like you might not fully support uh, the way you presented it as well. You're welcome to correct me if I'm blatantly wrong on that.
No,
But
I mean, yeah, that's accurate. Could
so
have been said better.
his statement is mostly about respecting trans pronouns and their personal belief about whether God would frown upon them for respecting them. And your response is, I guess Catholics don't teach about Sodom and Gomorrah anymore. So I think what was gleaned from that from most people, and it may not be what you intended, but I think what most people read there is one person saying, I respect trans people, and your response saying, well, then you're not reading the Bible right. And that making people feel like you're saying you shouldn't respect trans people. Does that logic, even if it's not what you intend, make some sense why people might come to that conclusion?
I get why it would be inflated that way. You have to define respect, and I think people define it in a very general term, and that is, if you don't agree with everything that I tell you, then you're not respecting me. But that's not true at all. We can have disagreements, even about really deep intellectual and moral issues, and we can still have a level of respect for each other. I think it very much does get inflated with, well, if you don't believe this about me that I tell you that is true about me, then you don't respect me, and that's not true. I just don't hold those beliefs. I can respect you
Mm-hmm.
regardless of that. But people really do inflate those few things. And again, it goes back to like you're invoking your Catholic belief into this.
Mm-hmm.
And my question back to you, kind of in that stance, would be, given the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, do you think God respected just any way that they acted? You
I
think?
don't. I I think that to pick out any specific thing in that story, I would pick out um, the way that they were treating strangers in their city and guests in their city, and rape. And I think those are the two themes that start with the when he's meeting with Abram, and end with his daughters raping him. And I think raping Lot. And I think that those two things are what make that are the connection to that story, and at no point is it expressly said that this is about things other than that. There are spots later in the Bible, several of them, where they talk about, and that's why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and they mention a ton of different things that support various different things. And if I
Right.
remember correctly, there's only one that briefly mentions in like a single sentence that has anything to do with sex, and that it was a lot more to do with everything else. So it does support what you're saying, that there was a plethora of reasons. But to invoke it on specifically homosexuality, like you have here, and like I've commonly seen, I think is a gross simplification of a story that I don't believe was the true focus.
So it's not about necessarily what like that is the only thing that's said in that story. That's never been my claim to the story, but it is part of it as far as they weren't going, they weren't acting in a way that God condoned. Therefore, they incurred the wrath of God. And my question still stands: do you think God respected them for the way that they acted? Clearly not. So like
For
so for
for
this,
trying to rape people, no. But
uh,
that's the thing.
but
It's like
it's no like
what
you
things?
you're
What
not
things
you're
are you
not
saying?
you're not can you agree that the story says that they weren't doing anything that God condoned? Like they were everything that God condoned, they were against. Everything.
I don't know that it says it in those exact terms. No.
It talks about righteousness, and nobody is acting in righteousness. And in the Old Testament, the way that you act in righteousness, the way you act in accordance to God, is to follow what He has condoned.
Right.
So
But
it
I don't
does
think
say
anywhere it
that.
says like they check 100% of the boxes. And like if you're saying anything that they're doing in that story is emblematic of not following what he says, then you can say speaking was against what they wanted, and knocking on doors was, and gathering in groups what, like, you could take anything and say that it was, this is an example of a thing that they were, that God doesn't condone.
I mean I
I
would.
think I do think we'll end up circling back around on this because there's some specific things that I want to talk about in regards to Old Testament rules, New Testament rules, and your beliefs in regards to those. And I think it kind of negates a lot of the conversation that we're having here when we talk about that.
Sure. And
Um,
and that's not the only example. I can, there are other examples in the Bible about it not condoning this stuff, and bringing the whole point is bringing up your biblical belief to defend it. That's what's not okay here. Like people,
mhm.
if people, uh, you know, they can act how they want to act. They have the free will to do that. It doesn't mean that it's condonable by God, and it doesn't mean that. And God is going to look at you and he'd
But
be like, hey, you could have been the one who'd been like, hey, this isn't necessarily a righteous way to live. Meanwhile, people are claiming that it is. You didn't stand up for me. There's a lot of that stuff in the Bible about, hey, just because you claim Lord, 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 my God, doesn't mean that He's gonna know you. Doesn't.
mhm.
So just
And,
claiming that I'm a Catholic, I held these beliefs, therefore it's fine. That doesn't hold water. Like none of these statements hold water in accordance to biblical teachings.
but I think that works in the inverse, right? So you're saying just because you say I believe this is what God would believe doesn't make it true. You want to base it in the Bible, and you're bringing up a specific example of the Bible, but I think it's not representative of your point. And that is my point, is that you are doing the same thing that you're claiming he's doing. You're saying he's saying I'm Catholic and I believe that God won't care if I respect trans people, and you're saying, well, yeah, but what about this story? And I don't think that story is emblematic of what you're trying to say. And again,
And
we may get into it further, and that there may be other stories that you do think are the case. I disagree with that example.
sure. And again, like yeah, I could bring up other examples and whatnot, but sure. I mean,
Hmm.
if you want to disagree with the one example, then that's fine. You can call it a bad
Well, that's the one
example. But
example you gave.
yeah, yeah. In the short Twitter conversation that I
Yep,
asked if he wanted to have a longer one, nobody took me up on. So it's not that I'm
I
running
did.
away from you did, and yeah, exactly. So, but
Hmm.
it's not that I'm running away from this. It's not
I
that
agree.
it's not that the Bible doesn't teach these things. I mean, you could
Okay.
say this response isn't the best response, which I would agree with.
Yes.
But I have 140 characters on Twitter. This
Hmm.
was like, I didn't know this was going to blow up as it did.
Hmm.
And it's all about people who are invoking the context of the Bible
Hmm.
to misrepresent it. And I don't think I'm misrepresenting the teachings of that. If you want to claim that it's not the strongest case, that's fine. But I don't think I'm misrepresenting it in any sort of way. But
Okay.
but yeah, we can move on if you want.
Okay. I mean, and the last point to that I just want to hammer home is that the context of what Philly's saying outside of the, if you call me a fake Catholic, you're the problem. I think that was a little unnecessary. Um, and him saying that he's fine. He thinks God is okay with respecting people for who they are and respecting their pronouns. And again, saying that that's a personal belief. It comes across that you're refuting it. Are you refuting the fact that you are willing to respect people's pronouns if they have whatever those be, and or that you can respect that they are being who they are? And I'm anticipating this will come to a semantical point, so feel free to ask for further definitions if necessary.
Uh, I want you to further define being who they are. How do you, how do you know that? How do they know that? And like,
I don't.
okay,
Only each person will know how they are, who they are within themselves.
okay. So respecting pronouns, I typically use people's names, and in vague terms like they, as far as like third party people.
Mm-hmm.
I try typically I try not to do the pronoun game. I think it's kind of a slippery slope fallacy as far as like, do you condone what I'm doing or not? And I don't want to sit here and condone it. I don't think it's necessarily right, but it doesn't mean that we can't let bygones be bygones. I respect you as far as the things we have in common, and what we can agree upon. And I think that's a lot more than just this one topic. And I would rather use your name and give you a hug and ask you about your day than worry about he, him, she, her issues. But I think
Okay.
so. If somebody, and in person, um, I think online a lot of it comes down to virtue signaling, but in person situations, I've been nothing but respectful towards trans people and gay people and whatnot. So I don't know how you could say that I wouldn't be respectful. Um,
I am not. I'm
yeah,
just asking if I'm asking you if you will be,
yeah, and
or
I've always been
if you are.
respectful. But what does it
And
mean?
and at no point when I'm reading these am I conflating anything towards you or trying to say that you aren't. I'm literally just asking a question, and you how you answered is how you choose to answer it,
Sure, I didn't mean
as
like
far
you
as that's
you
concerned.
specifically, but just
Hmm.
like in general. I
Fair.
don't know how people could say that I haven't been respectful. There's been multiple pace that I've been to, and we've all had a
Hmm.
good time. So like I don't understand where all this like inflation of like he hates everybody. He's not going to respect you. Like, yes, I
Hmm.
will. Doesn't like just because I don't see the world as you see it, doesn't mean that I don't respect you or anything like that. And in reverse, like I mean, you don't believe in God, you don't believe that I'm saved by grace through Jesus Christ, and like that's how I identify. I don't demand that you bring that up every time you speak to me, and I don't think it should be the same in reverse.
Hmm. So I think we've already touched on what Jack MP3 says after, and I tried to do honor to their argument here of you've already turned your backs on the teachings of Jesus by invoking Sodom and Gomorrah in an argument against someone whose only point was that they accept everyone and love them regardless of their identity. Um, which I think I mean I can let you speak to that directly. I believe we've covered that. You're trying to say you weren't refuting that, you were refuting the invoking of Catholicism, not necessarily not necessarily loving everybody regardless of who they are. Is
Right.
that
Ex-
accurate?
yes, exactly. And I
Okay.
think the phrase loving somebody for who they are gets invoked with agreeing with everything that they say, which is not, that's invoking something into something that it's really not. Or and when I ask people to be more specific, it never gets more specific. It's always wishing to be conflating into bigger issues like that. But
Mm. I think there's something to be said of asking for further definition can I think you are asking it in a way that you are just trying to represent your thoughts and feelings as accurately as possible.
yeah,
But I think a lot of people can read that as you trying to uh, avoid avoid answering in a way that makes you look bad.
Well, it's about being specific. Like, what are we talking about here? And most people would rather not get into the nitty gritty, and they'd rather be vague. And I think a lot of people don't even know what they think about this. They just get along to go along, and they don't want to invoke any flack or anything by saying the wrong thing to say. Which, you know, I don't necessarily have any issues. I'd rather get into the meat of it. Like, what are we talking about here? Be specific. And then as soon as you start asking those questions, people start to run away, which is pretty telling as far as how people actually care about others who go through this stuff. But
yeah, I think there are times when it's helpful to define further, and I think there are times when it comes off as disingenuous, and it comes off as um just feeling like uh somebody is trying to cause you to have to define something that seems clear. And that comes down to communication. Communication's fucking hard. So
yeah, I think
yeah.
being able to define what it is you're talking about is really important. But I don't know.
This is an exchange between you and Thero. Because someone asked me to refer to them as she instead of he isn't accepting. No one is telling Christians they have to marry a trans individual. Human is human, and any form of exclusion is a form of discrimination. So you asked, genuine question. Let's say someone refused to use trans pronouns, a trans person's pronouns, and claims it's because they are Christian. Would it be right to exclude that person? If they did exclude them, are you now discriminating against that person for being Christian? I think you are doing a table turn question that isn't invalid. And their response was absolutely, I would. Discrimination based upon a person's actions because they are incorrectly defining what it means to be a follower of Christ. Cherry picking scripture in order to exclude another human because of a name they want to be called isn't it.
Yeah. Which I think I've
I don't
asked.
believe.
I think I asked further after that was like, how am I cherry picking, or how am I cherry picking the scripture? And then he never got back to me. So that's another point. And like, can you be more specific? And everyone just kind of runs away. But yeah. So like, I mean, in his first,
go ahead.
Yeah, in the first tweet there, he said, any form of exclusion is a form of discrimination. And then the very next tweet that he put out was, absolutely, I would discriminate against Christians. Like, that's crazy to me.
Why?
Why is it bad to discriminate against Christians or against anybody? Like, why is that bad?
Yes.
Because it invokes exclusion and invokes hierarchy of certain beliefs over others, which is exactly what, you know, gay and trans people will claim that Christians are doing, and that you shouldn't do that. That's terrible. How dare you? But then when it comes to the inverse, they're like, of course we do that. What's wrong with that? And it's very disingenuous, and kind of goes to show you where people's heart really are. Like, they don't actually care about people the way that they say they do. They just kind of want their own viewpoints and stuff to be validated, which is how I take those tweets right there. Like, I don't care. Like, this is discriminatory. How dare you? Okay, but like, aren't you doing the same thing? Absolutely, I'm doing the same thing. You're a terrible person. Like, wow. Like, it's very hypocritical.
Well, I see your point. I think their point is that the difference being between what somebody's beliefs are and then them taking that and putting them into the Bible where maybe they aren't, and saying that I'm discriminating against that mindset versus somebody's sexuality or identification of their gender, which they're taking as this is an absolute fact versus this is a belief that is being backed up falsely.
Right. Which I think is a false flag, because I then asked for further clarifications and then nothing ever came. So I think that's an excuse people use, but I don't think it actually holds water, because I think the Bible is fairly clear and it is cohesive on this topic. But you know.
Well, the only thing that you brought up that I found that you were directly quoting anything in the Bible was the Sodom and Gomorrah one, which I would put in a similar boat to what he's saying, because I think we have very different interpretations of that
Sure.
as a whole.
And I think you're more well read, but even then, I mean, I kept asking clarifying questions. Like I was never trying to misrepresent anybody here, and nobody would clarify anything, which is the thing. Like I was accused of cherry picking. I was like, okay, how am I cherry picking? Ghost on that comments, not responding to that. That would require work on my part, and I don't do that. It's just insane. Not
So
saying that he never does that, but you know,
yeah.
when you're having this kind of conversation and then you accuse somebody of something and then they say, how am I doing that? I don't understand. And then you don't respond, but then you keep holding your position. Like there's something wrong with that position there. Like accusing somebody and then refusing to clarify by being like, I don't think I'm doing that. How am I doing that? And then you just continue on with your accusation and never actually clarifying it. Like that's a problem.
It's definitely not conducive of a conversation that comes to any resolution. It's throwing out an accusation without then being willing to back it up.
Yeah.
And I can get behind what you're saying there. I think Joy-Cons posted shortly after in this long thread talking about the idea of believing following some things in the Bible and not others, to which you had a response. It is clear that the Old Testament rules are for Jews, not New Testament Christians. But if you wish to follow them, that's up to you. That's a large topic with a lot of examples. Jesus was against teaching the law is how you are saved. We are saved by grace. And this is a similar conversation to what you and I had when I was trying to understand something similar. This is something that I see in a lot of Christians that I think most people are bringing up about the cherry picking is there are some things that people quote from the Old Testament that, well, what about the Bible says this, and then not follow other things that are also in the Old Testament. So like, why are you choosing to follow these specific things? And that's where people get you're cherry picking and using some things to back your beliefs, but throwing out things that don't support your argument. Can you speak to that at all? Directly relating to Old Testament rules and, thou shalt not lie with a man as you do with a woman type things, and how do any of those apply in comparison to other things that are in the same books within the Bible, sometimes even in the same paragraphs?
Yeah, it's I mean, this is like a really deep conversation that you could have, and I don't know everything that's in the Bible, but essentially it comes down to there's the moral law that the Jews follow, things like the Ten Commandments and so on, and then there is like the more of the religious law, the Mosaic law, about okay, well if you're going to be my follower, do these things. They don't know why they're doing it exactly, like they can't really come up with reasons. They're just following what God condones, and they now in the future we can look at pretty most of those and say like, oh, these actually have like some real world implications that like, if you did these things you would probably be worse off, like eating shellfish back in the day, eating pork if you don't cook pork all the way through, or shellfish, like you get like really sick, that kind of stuff. And God doesn't clarify himself a lot in the Old Testament. He gives people commands, and if you're faithful to me, you're going to do these things. And so when it comes to the Mosaic law, that was a lot of it. And when Jesus came, he fulfilled the Mosaic law, and he's keeping the moral law side of it. And this would fall under the moral law side. And there's a lot of examples in the New Testament in regards to sexual immorality. And, sexual immorality, it's anything outside of a man and a woman are married and they have sex together. Like anything outside of that is immoral. Like premarital sex is sexual immorality. Having a woman having sex with a man or vice versa while they're married but not having sex with their husband, that's sexual immorality. If you
adultery,
but that's part of it. That's just more specific term for it. And even it even goes so far as to say if you lust after somebody in your heart, like if say that you're married or even not married, it doesn't really matter, and you look at somebody else and you lust after that person, and you like really think about it, and then you come up with like images and this whole in your brain about um declothing them and whatnot. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into here, but even that is adultery of the heart. It's sexual immorality of your own heart, which is not to be condoned. So this stuff goes deep. It's not just don't be gay. It's like, look, like this stuff, like sex is a really serious deal that involves the only way that we have to reproduce humans. And if you want a human to be reproduced in a good way, you're gonna do it in the confines of marriage, and you need two parents and a loving household, and that unit to be focused on being together and themselves and bringing up this child. And anything outside of that is going to degrade that. Therefore, you should not partake. It's not good. It's not condoned. It's not of what God wants for his children. And I think statistically that is backed up wildly in the future we live in.
So I'm going to have to, there's a lot there. I'm going to have to jump over the majority of that to kind of drive to the point that I was trying to originally understand. So you're saying that there's some stuff that was moral law and some stuff that was other law, and the moral law is the keep stuff.
Essentially, because
So how do you know what is and isn't in the moral law versus the other law?
teachings of the New Testament. You got to read the New Testament and follow along with what God did. I mean, Jesus kept the Mosaic Jewish law, and not to like a perfect T, because the what is it, basically politics of it all. That's not the point in what God was condoning. Basically it all can be summed up in love your neighbor as yourself. And there was one other part to that I'm blanking on, but anyway.
Love the Lord God.
Yeah, love the Lord God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself.
And my second is similar. Yeah, that's Matthew. We'll get to that.
And so that's where the moral law comes in. But if you're talking about like, hey, don't wear a garment made of two different types of clothes. Don't do any sort of work at all. Don't even carry your mat that you've been begging on after you've been healed out of the synagogue where you were begging. Like, don't even do that. That's work. That's sinful. How dare you do that? Like, no. That's not what God's trying to condone here. Like, he wants you to have a good, prosperous life, and these laws are what you want to follow. But if you're going to try to start telling people that all of a sudden they're against God because they're not doing, all of this legalistic stuff, that's not what it's about at all. So that's where all that kind of comes into play. And if you want to know more about all that, you do have to get into the nitty gritty and start looking into it. But
and I definitely would love some direct examples, because we keep getting back to, you have examples from the New Testament that say homosexuality and being trans are not okay. And I would definitely love some examples of that, but there's a lot on this list to get through first. So we'll have to save that. But so why, if the Old Testament stuff is either moral or not, or other, is only, if that is only explained fully and understood through the New Testament, do you reference the Old Testament at all when talking about this type of thing? The thou shalt not lie with a man as with a woman is not a 10 commandment, and it is in the same breath as thou shalt not square your beard, and you got to shave beard. So why is one okay and one not? And you're saying that's because it's in the New Testament that one is okay and one isn't.
Yeah.
Or rather, one is said it isn't okay and one isn't mentioned again.
Well, that's one of them for sure. I think the whole general idea of like the moral law of what God condones kind of covers that as well. But Christian means Christ follower, and this is something that God spoke of. It talked about sanctity of marriage, and when you even talked about if you have sex outside of marriage, you basically have tied yourself to that person. Which is not good for your future marriages and your future kids. You now have a tie to somebody else. So this is definitely something that was condoned or talked about by Jesus, and to kind of pretend that it wasn't is pretty. It's not good.
Mm-hmm. So I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying why talk about Old Testament stuff at all if the only thing that matters is the New Testament stuff.
Well, that's like why would you talk about history, type deal, and that's like the history
Well,
before.
when you're
That's how we got all the prophecy. That's how it all like ties back into why the New Testament is so important. That's why Jesus claiming who he is. It's important to understand the Old Testament and where people are coming from. And there's like I said, the moral law versus the legalistic law that people followed. You can still gain a whole lot of perspective and moral guidance from the Old Testament stories.
mm-hmm. But when specifically saying about your beliefs and quoting Old Testament things, but then also saying that the Old Testament isn't defining what is moral and what isn't, that's only defined in the New Testament. Why quote the Old Testament stuff and not the New Testament things that you're saying are the actual scripture
I mean, I'm
that should
willing.
be followed in
I'm,
regards to that?
I'm totally willing to. I mean, if you're asking why I didn't
Okay.
make the perfect argument in this Twitter conversation, it's because it was a Twitter conversation and it wasn't something that I studied for a week and was then putting into words. This is a Twitter conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
and I was willing to have more conversations with people and nobody else was. And so, this is it's not that I can't back up all this stuff that I'm talking about. Like I get what you're saying. Like why would you bring up an Old Testament thing? And that's because it's taught in general Christian uh, teachings that like this is an example of these people were immoral in a lot of ways, and sex is what's directly brought up, and you say it's more correlated to rape and whatnot. Um, but it is talked about just general immorality, and
Mm-hmm.
and the reason I brought it up was because earlier he said respecting somebody who acts in a certain way, um, which is outside of what God condones. He said I don't think God would disrespect me for that. But this is an example of like, hey, God, these people were acting in a way that was not condoned by God, and God was definitely not respecting these people. So I don't think it's not something I was using to bash gay people or trans people over the head. It was like, why? Like, I don't think God would be mad that I'm like respecting people who act outside of what God condoned. Essentially, it was what I was making, like, hey, God's not condoning this, and he was like, well, I don't think God would be mad at me for respecting people who do act this way, and like, that's how you defining respectful. But if you want to talk about bringing up like the Bible to
So
defend this stuff, like, okay, there's stuff in the
how do
Bible
you
where
define
God's
respectful then?
well, I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you could respect somebody.
How do you define respect? Because you refuted this, so
Yeah,
I think that leads people to believe that you don't agree with that. That
sure.
God is okay with you respecting those people. So that sounds to me like maybe I don't understand your definition of respectful. So can you explain that?
Well, I think it goes down to what Philly was using the definition as. And so going back to the tweet, I just found it again. I'm a believer in God. I'm a Catholic. So invoking your beliefs in God, the Bible. I don't believe God would frown upon me for respecting people for being who they are. So
Yep.
that type of respecting somebody is saying, God would not frown on me for telling people that acting outside of what God tells them to act is okay. Like, no, God does frown on people who claim that stuff, because then you're not leading them to God. You're supposed to be an example. You're supposed to be a godly example, and like you're not supposed to be telling people everything is okay, everything is fine, because it's not. That's not what the Bible teaches. And so my response to that was like, no, God doesn't just say everything's fine. He destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. That's basically what this comes down to. But then it gets conflated with everything else.
Well, I think the definition of respect here is the crux, and you nailed it on the head, because that's something you've been saying for a while, is like you need this term defined, because it sounds like your definition of respect isn't the one that I see colloquially used. So
Yeah.
that's where it comes down to. You're saying that God wouldn't be mad if you respect them and you're taking respect as saying, telling them everything that they're doing is accepted in the Bible. And I didn't read that and haven't read respect to mean that, but rather just saying that you're not going to disrespect them. You're not going to purposefully uh, be a jerk to them or tell them that they're an awful person. Or I think that the difference between respecting somebody and agreeing with them 100% is what we're breaking it down to, where you're saying I can't agree with everybody and every action that everybody takes all the time.
Right.
The same way you feel that way about homosexuality, trans people, etc., but that you would about someone who cheats on their husband and somebody who works on the Sabbath, which I imagine you have. I think we've all worked on a Sunday before. And that is one of the 10 commandments. So like, if that's not one of the moral things, like, I don't know what would be. But I, I guess my point being that you're not saying you're blameless either, and that we all have things that in the Bible, in the way you understand it, that's not condoned. So
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like the definitions of respect are very different between you and at least myself, but how I've seen other people define respect.
Yeah. Well, respect can be defined in different ways depending on how it's used. Like our language is very contextual, and you
Right.
know,
I don't
you
I
can
don't know that there
like I
was
said,
anything in there
in the beginning,
in his response.
you can
Go ahead.
you don't think there's anything. Well, he's for respecting somebody for who they are.
Right.
So claiming that somebody who
So in what case should you disrespect somebody?
I'm not saying that you should disrespect them. I'm saying God
So
doesn't.
then why does the rest of that sentence matter?
Uh, because God doesn't say that this is who they are.
But why does that matter if you shouldn't disrespect anybody anyway?
It's not about so respect in this context is being used to say condone. Um, wouldn't frown
I
on
don't
me
read
for
it that way.
for
So
condoning people who they are. I've never been disrespectful to anybody. I mean, if you just
I
want to
agree.
use like the blatant term respect, I would agree that respecting somebody in general is very important. Going up to somebody
Perfect.
and meeting them where they are, that's extremely important. I do that
I
all the
agree.
time. So,
hmm
I mean, if you just
I
want to
agree.
break it down to that basic form, then yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, you should respect everybody. But it doesn't mean you should
I,
condone everything that they do, which is the context that he was trying to use it here, which
mhm.
is what I was refuting.
Okay. I will disagree, and I think we'll end up having to agree to disagree that that was the context he was using it in.
Well,
That was the context you were replying to.
if you look past in the conversation, I think it's fairly like I think it's very reasonable to say that's the context it was being used in. But like I said,
hmm
respect can get inflated with a lot of different things, so that's why you got to
hmm
define the terms.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like when we take that basic definition, you and I feel similarly that I don't necessarily condone everything everybody does, but it's not going to make me be an asshole to them,
Right.
or completely disrespect them, because that's not what's in my heart, and that's not what's right.
Exactly.
Um,
And that's not what
okay,
Jesus did. So
fair. Joy Cons. There's like a billion religions and denominations that believe in the same God that you do with different rules and beliefs and ideas. How can you say that's not subjective? Two people can read the Bible start to finish and get ridiculously different ideas from it. And I think you and I have exemplified that today with just one of the many stories in the Bible, that you can get different things from the Bible and different stories, which does add a level of subjectivity to it. And I think your argument was it's not subjective, it's objective based off of what's written.
yeah, if you look at it,
Can you speak to how you and I can have disagreements about a single story, but there still be an objectivity to it?
sure. I mean the message and what it condones, I think, is objective. If you read it in context and you actually aren't looking just to affirm what you believe into it. It certain stories like like the Sodom and Gomorrah story, holistically, what I'm saying that the story talks about as far as these people were not doing anything that was condoned by God. They were not respecting the moral law that God had put upon us. That is very readable into that story, and if you're not saying it doesn't blatantly say that, therefore I'm not going to read it into it. Well, you can do that, and then you could read the rest of the Bible and still come to the same conclusion that I'm coming to as I am talking about that being talked about in this story. So I don't think that the conclusions, I don't think it's subjective. I don't think you can come to subjective conclusions about it. As far as like what stories are specifically talking about, and you can have discussions and disagreements about what a story is explicitly talking about, and most of the time you just have to read like a few verses before and a few verses after, and people just like to take the one and discuss the heck out of it and not even try to understand the context behind it. But I don't think the Bible is subjective, and it's very objective in what it teaches and the rules that you're supposed to follow. And I think it is like with the concept we talked about earlier, as far as like the Mosaic law and stuff, what you should continue to follow and what you shouldn't continue to follow, the legalism side of it. That is like, you definitely have to get into the weeds of the Bible and really look into what it says. But even so, everything that we have to go on can be taken from the New Testament. So that only becomes a problem if you're questioning like the history and everything like that behind it, which is like a whole nother discussion, like a big discussion. But
So
yeah,
I think to her point, so even within Christianity, there are sects. There's Catholic, there's Baptist, etc., etc. So to reframe her question to maybe get answered a little bit more clearly to the specific question, if there's not subjectivity, why are there different sects within following the same book?
Most of it just has to do with what they primarily focus on and what they put a lot of emphasis behind. I think that's mostly where you get that. But as far as they believe like totally different things, I don't think that's true. I think that's become true for the Catholic sect, because they've always been the more religious side. It was meant for Romans specifically, and the way that it was put together was in very genuine political Roman styles, as far as like you have the one head and then you had the people under him and the people under him, kind of like you had the emperor and the senate and stuff like that.
Hierarchical structure.
Yeah. So and then you're supposed to listen to the Pope no matter what, which is not biblical. So I mean, there's like a lot of things that you could do, and a lot of the different sects come down to what they primarily focus on and how they like to worship. Like some sects enjoy being more traditional and more formal, and some like to be a little more modern in their style, as far as like the type of music. And it's not all just hymns spoken from the voice. We now actually have like electrical instruments that we can do all that stuff. And so they just have, most of the differences come from that. And I would kind of push back on a lot of where the fringe stuff that they teach about on some of the different things. But then again, you go back to the Bible and you talk about it, and I don't think that you can come to different conclusions unless you're just trying to read your own morality into the Bible, which happens way too often. But that's a human tendency that was going on even in the New Testament. It's where all of the letters from Paul and all the other apostles come into, like Ephesians and Corinthians and stuff like that. Those were letters written to churches about how we should act, and how they're letting their personal feelings and conjectures get in the way of what God actually wants. And so that's just something humans do in general, and we have to keep ourselves accountable. That's why it's so important to talk about this stuff, and to keep referencing the Bible. Bring up the defenses in the scriptures. Like, don't just talk about how you feel. Bring up an actual objective foundation that we can go off of, and we can discuss that. But even if you look at the Twitter comments and YouTube comments, like that's not at all what people are trying to do. They just want to condone what they think, what they feel, and it's just an unfortunate reality that we have to face.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of them don't take the Bible into consideration at all.
Sure.
And your concern personally, and what kicked all this off, wasn't necessarily with those people, but rather those who were trying to say that the Bible was saying something that you don't believe it says.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. And that's where you get into like you need to go back to like if you're going to invoke the Bible, you need to go back to scriptures and say where does it say this? And if it doesn't say that, then I think you have a problem intellectually in the way that you act versus what you claim to act according to.
So Cryptic says, Markinator, I think you've been in the SM64 community for about 4 years. I have never heard you talk about Jesus Christ in those 4 years. It feels like this whole situation came out of nowhere. Can you explain? Not saying your beliefs are bad, just curious.
Yeah, I mean, we're here to play Mario, and that's is what it is. I've had conversations on my stream about being a Christian. It's not something that I push onto people necessarily because I do ultimately think that we're here to play Mario, and this whole incident has kind of forced me into the position of no, this is who I am. I'm gonna maintain this position. It's not hateful, and I feel like I've really been forced into this position as far as like accusations from other people claiming that I'm being hateful without any sort of examples and not taking into account all the stuff that I've done in the Mario scene. And so, you know,
So you've been Christian,
yeah,
and it for those who wanted to look, they could find that has been the case.
yeah,
But you don't feel it to be relevant to the SM64 speedrunning community until this specific example.
exactly.
And now that you're being asked to speak about it and define your terms and everything, that's why people are hearing about it now, because literally you've been asked to talk
Yeah,
about it now.
exactly.
Yep.
And a lot of it is, making sure that I'm not just getting slandered into existence. Like I don't want to go anywhere. I want to continue to play Mario and to host tournaments, and hopefully we'll do that in the future. Um, but yeah, I mean, if I'm going to be forced to defend it all, then I can and I will. And and it seems that most people are unwilling to defend their position, which is interesting. But we can move forward.
That's why we're here right now having a conversation, because I want to make sure that I do what I can to try and give voice to the people who have questions, and that you're able to um, respond without being attacked
Yeah,
directly, and rather we're just having a conversation, in some places debate.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And I appreciate that. It's very, very
this
speaks to your character. Let's say.
Dissocial says that's a good one actually. Debating the details of religion is useless, since you could ask any Christian that doesn't suck. I'd be more curious to know about him personally and not his ideology.
I'm not even sure what that
Ignoring
means.
the insult, and I assumed you would not understand. They want to know what you personally feel outside of talking about religion, and I don't think you're going to be able to separate those two things, because it's a part of your identity.
Ultimately, yes. But if you want to ask how I personally feel about people and their ability to make their own decisions, I think I've made that clear not only in my past actions but in present statements of if you want to do this, that's fine. As far as like our relationship goes, like I will continue to be your friend. I will continue to allow you into tournaments that I host. I wish that you could say the same about me. Doesn't quite seem to be the case, but I'm totally yeah, I hold
You
no
hold no ill will
grudges.
towards anyone, regardless of their self-identification, sexuality, any of that stuff.
Yeah,
As
and
long as they're not, I'd assume maybe you wouldn't condone or want to interact with murderers and things that are very beyond the pale. But I just want to, I know that's a drastic thing. It's akin to bringing up Hitler when you talk about bad things. But like, my point being, you're not saying these people are awful people. You just
right.
outside of the religion or anything like that, it's we're all people. And but religion is part of who you are. Jesus Christ is what guides you.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to say that their identity lies in how they identify, as far as like male, female, and so forth, you could easily make the statement, "I identify as a Christian," and people don't
Mhm.
like to kind of make those two things equal. But that is, I live my life according to that. I view myself as that. I pray every day. I have a relationship with God, and this is how I identify. This is how I live my life. It affects me in every way, shape, and form. And I don't think people give it that much credit. They don't think about it in those terms.
Okay. Mystic says, I guess I'd like to know why he feels a responsibility to spread his own beliefs and whether or not he is considered the hypocrisy that can lie in that.
I view this comment to be hypocritical in and of itself, because people are spreading their beliefs onto me and then forcibly kicking me out of a community and an objective leaderboard of times that you got in a video game. But
This comment does not do those actions. Those are things that happened that
yeah,
would support what you're saying. But this comment specifically is saying irrelevant to those things. Why get involved in the first place?
uh, yeah, and it's something we've already talked about. It's because the Bible got invoked in a way that it shouldn't get invoked. It was used to defend something that it doesn't defend, and that was why I did. I wasn't pushing it on to anybody who didn't already claim to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So
So you were having a conversation, a theological conversation, challenging the beliefs of the person in regards specifically to what the Bible said, not necessarily pushing your own beliefs, but rather stating an objective that's not what it says.
sure, absolutely, and I think this comment is. I don't know if it's directly asked a question. I don't know exactly where it came from, but
No, but I think it was an important thing because I think a lot of people have this question. And it's a question I asked you when we first talked privately. And I said, why do you feel responsible for, like, why even publicly come out and say anything that is going to create, like, there's no way they were going to take that in a positive way, given the context of the conversation leading up to when you commented and said, like, that's not what the Bible says. And then the conversation that follows after it, why do you feel responsible to correct them?
because basically said the Bible said something that it didn't, and that's where I stake my life in the end. And I'm not gonna allow somebody to use it in a disingenuous manner like that. That's not okay.
Mm-hmm. So, did you need to, or did you just choose to because it was a Twitter conversation and you happened to see it, so you commented on it? Like, do
I
you actively go out of your way to try and do things like this?
What do you actively go out of my way?
Mm-hmm. Do you seek out people misrepresenting the Bible and purposefully try and correct those, like it is a calling to you to correct people who are wrong?
No, I mean, I don't go out and like seek the internet for every single instance of somebody
Mm-hmm.
misrepresenting the Bible. But if it
Mm-hmm.
comes across your plate and you see it and you don't defend it, I think
Mm-hmm.
that says a lot about what you actually believe about the Bible and your convictions for it. I mean, if you could say that, you say this for any book. If somebody brought up any sort of book and was like, in this book, it claims that, you know, you can do X and it doesn't claim that, like, would you hold the person, like, somebody coming in and saying, hey, that's not what it says, like, it doesn't even have to be this whole big deal. But because people
Mm-hmm.
hold a lot of animosity towards it, I think, because it doesn't condone a lot of the things that um, they do in their personal lives. When you invoke it, they then take it as somewhat of a personal attack. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't doing anything that you even consider out of the ordinary for things that aren't religious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, you.
I know my uncle used to post stuff all the time that was incorrect, and I would just post a Snopes article under it. I didn't need to do it, but it
Yeah,
was kind of annoying that he was posting shit that wasn't true, and so I just sent a gentle correction. And I imagine from your perspective, that's what you were doing. You weren't trying to start a shitstorm, but rather just doing what everyone else is doing on the internet and putting your opinions and thoughts out there. And in this case, it happened to be about the Bible and correcting something that you don't believe is in there that they were saying was. Is that a good
Mm-hmm.
analogy and summation?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Craig says, I love how you people always selectively choose the Bible verses that tell you to hate others, but never listen to the multitude of teachings in the Bible telling you love everyone as Jesus did. And then quotes John 13:34. It's not a good look for the religion as a whole. Um,
Yeah.
so jumping over the you people part, as we want to talk about you personally, not necessarily holding you accountable for other people's actions and experiences that they've had outside of you. Uh, John 13:34 says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. So now, yeah. So that is that one, just saying love others as Jesus had loved as well.
That's right.
What are your thoughts in regards to that quote directly relating to your actions in this specific uh incident, let's say? I don't know. The
Topic.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, topic. That works.
I think everything that I've done and even set up to this point does love everyone the way that Jesus loved them. Again, it kind of goes back to condoning everything that people do and believe. That's not what Jesus did. And again, like, if somebody invokes the Bible and in an incorrect manner, I'm definitely going to say, hey, the Bible doesn't say that. But yeah, I don't think this comment is actually trying to be genuine or having like an actual conversation. It's more like, hey, shut up type deal.
Well, I mean,
Because
it does quote a piece of scripture, which is something you have claimed thus far is severely lacking in most of these conversations, is anything based in scripture.
yes, but it doesn't give it any examples as far as like how I have unloved others as Jesus, like how I've gone against that. Like, how have I not loved people as Jesus loved them? Um, like I haven't called anybody a name. I haven't done anything of the sort. I haven't been rude to anybody. I've simply stated what the Bible says and defended it when it gets brought up. And then I'm kind of getting hit with these type of comments like, how dare you not love people like Jesus loved them? But I challenge this person to find it in the Bible where he said, uh, those who, a man who lies with another man is totally condoned in his actions. I would challenge him to do that, or about finding something
I
that
think
said,
I think that's a fallacious thing to say in the first
uh,
place. Like, find a thing that doesn't exist is
right,
not a thing. Like,
yeah, because
but
it's not in there, but he's trying to say that basically he loved people and basically condoned their actions. You're not condoning their actions, therefore you're not loving Jesus, and that's not in there. That's what I'm saying. Like,
mhm.
what he's saying is not in the Bible. He's just bringing up a piece of scripture that says love people as Jesus did, not giving an example of how I haven't done that, and then just leaving it as it is. So
So I think in their argument, and let's wrap in Doc Ravioli's as well. Just keep quoting Matthew 22:37 through 40. Anything else he tries to quote is likely to be from the Old Testament, Paul or John. None of those are Christ's words. The Bible verses I've included are Christ's words. Good luck. That quote,
well,
Matthew 22:37 through 40.
to say Paul and John are not Christ's words is to say that there are no Christ words in the New Testament. But you keep going.
Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And we talked about this earlier. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So I think the John quote and the Matthew quote kind of go hand in hand. In Jesus is saying, love God and love each other. And Jesus is also saying, love each other as I have loved you, and him being God, so it all matches.
Yep, absolutely.
Um, So I think where they're coming into it is and I, I can't perpe- perfectly speak for anybody. I can only make assumptions based off of what I've found and rational thinking. That a lot of this is harkening back to the conversation with Philly, where he was, where it sounds like you guys have different or interpreted the term respect differently. I don't think he was meaning it as means that you accept everything across the board. Um, and that would be up to him to define, not me.
I,
But you definitely were reading it that way.
I think if you look in the beginning of the conversation, that is exactly what he was using it to mean. These people aren't doing
Okay,
anything
let's go
wrong.
back
You
to
should condone every. Yeah, go back and see what he specifically
that.
says. Says people can do whatever they want, and as long as they're not intentionally hurting somebody, it's fine. And that's not what the Bible teaches. Like, it's just not what the Bible teaches at all. You should follow the Bible and its teachings because it brings prosperity to your life, not just in your personal life, but also it's about how to run a society and how we should encourage behaviors in others, and to point out, not necessarily like tell people that they're going to hell right this second, but that hell is part of the Bible. We could talk about that if you want, but the Bible doesn't say that you can just act however you want and everything's fine. Like, that's just not what it says. And for people to claim that it does is really disingenuous to me, because it's so obvious. That's and if you read anything in the Old or New Testament, that's not what it says at all.
Hmm. So I I think that that whole bit, I'm not going to disagree. In regards to them saying love is love, people can do what makes them happy as long as they aren't intentionally hurting others. Saying I'm a born and raised Catholic, and that directly, the sentence after it not being non sequitur, I think is reasonable for you to say, well, that's not what the Bible says. Um, I don't think that necessarily defines what respect means further on, but I do better understand why you would turn to that definition given the context of the previous sentences. Um, I still would not read it that way, and I think that it's not necessarily wrong that you did, and it's nice to hear the clarification there. And I've believed that anyway because I have never seen you be disrespectful to anybody. Other than the Sodom and Gomorrah one was a little curt, and I think that might have been a little rude. But um, that's, if that's the worst, that's, not a big deal
Yeah.
to me. But um, yeah, I still think that this one sentence. I don't believe God would frown upon me for respecting people for being who they are, and if trans go by certain pronouns, I will respect that. I think that, coupled with you then saying, well, the Bible says no, and here's an example, is what has caused a lot of this, people being worried that you are then saying you're not willing to respect people, in the generalized term versus the contextual term, because I think a lot of people read it the same way I did, as a standalone sentence here and not with the context that you were putting into it.
Yeah, and I could understand how people would conflate it to mean that way. I think if you do look, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, and then into that, and then also take into account everything, how I've acted and in the past towards everyone, and how I've conducted myself towards and for everyone. I don't think it's, yeah, I don't think that's a fair. Uh, I don't think it's fair to say that I'm not going to respect people. Like, I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
What example can you give me? And nobody can give an example. And I've asked people to, and
The
they can't even
the
quote
only
me on anything. So
the only example I would give is that response.
sure,
And I
and
think that's what worried people, is that response where you were responding to respect being the definition of condoning versus the other side of um, respecting them and still treating them as an equal human being.
sure, and yeah, we're all equal in terms of, we are made God made us all, and nobody is put higher up than another person here on earth. Somebody might have more material wealth, somebody even might be smarter than somebody else, but nobody has more inherent value than anyone, and that's very clear in the Bible. And I think that's how I've conducted myself in every way, shape, and form. So
L Foxy is blue. We can probably move past this pretty quick. Made a lot of references to the Gospel of Thomas in regards to saying trans people are okay. I had tuned in on that one too. I had never heard of Gospel of Thomas. I did some Googling, and it felt like a Google conversation between the two of us, quoting different parts of Wikipedia. In my personal opinion, they may be a theologian, and I have no idea. But at the bottom line, they were saying Gospel of Thomas is part of the Bible because it's part of the Q thing, and it's not part of the Bible. The Wikipedia article says it's not part of the Bible, and it's not a widely accepted thing, regardless of them saying that's the case. Some theologians think it might be important, and it could have some legitimacy, and it could have been written around the same time. But as far as general belief in a discussion about the Bible, the Gospel of Thomas should be irrelevant. Do you agree with that statement?
yes, definitely. I mean, as far
Okay.
as this conversation goes, but also I want to bring up what he actually brought up. Can you like actually look that up and quote the scripture that he quoted? Because it's horrendous. The fact that El Foxy is blue is like brought that up and then defended it. That speaks so much more than anything that I've said. I think because it literally says that women are not worthy of heaven,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
horrible.
Simon uh wait.
That's Legion
Yeah, here we
something.
go. Yeah, Legion 114. Simon Peter said to them, quote, Mary should leave us, for females are not worthy of the life. Jesus said, Look, I am going to guide her in order to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every female who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah. So women are not worth. The life means eternal life, and so at the very
Mhm.
beginning it says supposedly claiming that God doesn't think that women are worthy of eternal life, which is like the worst thing you could ever believe. And the fact that it was brought up and defended by so many people is horrendous, I think. And people really need to check themselves.
Yeah, I definitely I don't even know that, like, that's to me seems metaphorical, not literal. Even if this was in the Bible, I don't know that I would read that as give what they said, which is Jesus said he'll give Mary a penis, which that is not what I read here. What I read here is they if like I will make women equal to males in being able to go to heaven. Like, for every female who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so
not
what do you mean like that they take up the role of men?
no,
Because
no, that resem she may too become a living spirit resembling you males. Like, yeah, this whole thing is disjointed to what the entire teachings are leading up to when this might be.
yeah. And I
I
looked
just
this
don't
up.
think it has any backings anywhere else.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. But I looked this up more after it was brought up, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, what are you talking about? But it's a part of a group of books called the Apocrypha that the
Mhm.
Catholics have brought in. I don't know exactly who, if it was like the Pope or what, but they decided that these groups of books, uh, back in like the early 1900s, like within like 100 years, um, that they are should be a part of canonical scripture. And I mean they've got quotes like this kind of stuff which are pretty horrendous and go against the holistic teaching of the Bible. In my
Mhm.
opinion, that is how it is. And in my further opinion, which might be a bit bold, but through the Catholic Church, they're attempting to bring in more people and deflate the Bible in a sense so it can apply to more people and make more money. Therefore, so I think it's if you really look at the teachings and stuff of it, like there really is no reason. And then to say that we didn't have this for like 2,000 years, uh, and that's fine. It doesn't say anything new to that kind of like. No, this definitely brings up a lot of new concepts that weren't in the Bible before, and it just brings up a whole
Mhm.
lot of issues. And I don't think people should really follow that. People should
Mhm.
not believe that women are unworthy for the eternal life. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, that is pretty brutal, especially the only now. Yeah, I think we should move past Gospel of Thomas. I don't include that in the conversation, mostly because I think that if you don't follow it and the common core of Christians don't follow it, then it's not really relevant.
Yeah.
So this is a long one from Joker Factory, who you did have a conversation with. Um, and if people haven't watched that, definitely suggested to at least listen as Mark and Joker talked for an hour and a half. And I think both tried to understand each other, and it was a good conversation where both were respectful of each other. This is possibly the last thing I'm going to say about this. As someone who looked up to you until today, as someone who was not only good at the game, but also a very respectable and kind person, I can't believe you can't put aside your beliefs for one fucking second to respect the people of this community. Now you're going around and saying you were being respectful, and we've already confirmed you were openly opposing support for transgendered people. If you haven't seen yet that you are the problem, then let's make that clear. Living in the Deep South, I know several people who have no issue with LGBTQ plus folk and are Christian. We don't have an issue with you believing in God. We have an issue with you not respecting other people's identities. That's called being a bigot, Mark. If you think that wasn't the path that God paved for you, then how dare you impose your beliefs of what God is on someone else? Your bigotry goes beyond just believing in God. You follow libs of TikTok. Surely you aren't following them for religious purposes, so clearly we found another reason that you're being a problem. That account is purely for disrespecting LGBT folk. And if you think that's okay, then remember that God loves everyone. There are no exceptions to that. You need to learn a thing or two about respect. I'm not saying you need to be an atheist to be part of the SM64 community. I'm not even saying you have to be democratic, really. In fact, I believe in God for a long time while I was part of the community, but I've always believed that anyone can be anything that they want, and we should respect that because we want their respect too, right? Treat others the way you want to be treated. I just hope you take a good hard look in the mirror and realize that we're not the reason you were fired. You are. And because you put your beliefs before morals, that's what is happening. To think I respected you for as long as I did is now a joke to me. God can't be real because he wouldn't make people like you. Just to get out ahead of it, um, there's a lot of inflammatory things in here I don't think were necessary, and I think were passion that if we can avoid them, would be ideal because I don't think I think they are representative of his passion, not, and I think they're hurtful and not really relevant to our conversation, you and I. If you want to say something to address it, you're welcome to, because I imagine it was very hurtful to be told you were respected and looked up to, and now you're not. So I won't cut you off on it completely. I just don't want to live on it too long.
Sure, give me one sec.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, you just want me to respond to it as a whole, or you got any specific?
I mean, we can go line by line. I just was going to say I'm not going to, or not line by line, but point by point, and I'm happy to direct us through it and keep it on target. But I'm going to skip over the inflammatory things because I don't think that they are conducive of you and I having a good conversation. But I wanted to pause and give you a chance if you wanted to respond to it. Personally, I think we should just leave it as what it is, and that is that. But I'm not trying to silence you either.
Sure. So just going back to the beginning, like you said, yeah, there's a lot of inflammatory stuff in here, and I
Mhm.
think if I spoke to anybody um, in the LGBTQ community in this sort of way, I would then get a lot of hate versus this is kind of accepted. But that's just kind of what I think kind of speaks to the hypocrisy of a lot of what has been said and have gone on. And this is definitely not indicative of how we had our conversation. Um,
Mhm.
it seems to
I
be
agree.
one of those situations that like I'm behind a computer screen. I don't have to look at you in the face. I can kind of type and say what I want. But then when it came to like actually having conversation, this kind of rhetoric and stuff didn't really come up. We had a very respectful conversation. We could talk it out.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Which is
it's
why I put most of this on passion, and
yes,
heat of the moment. And I think you and his conversation afterward was a good conversation where, you weren't being called a bigot and saying that you're proof of God's non-existence, which is
yes.
very, very hateful and unnecessary in my opinion. But I understand that there was passion and hurt.
Yeah. But yeah, this kind of goes back to a lot of stuff we've already talked about. You can't
Mhm.
put your beliefs aside for 1 second to respect people in the community. Where are you drawing that basis? You'd have to give me an example. Please be
The
specific.
the the exam the example would be that one post where somebody said I still respect trans people, and you said, what about Sodom and Gomorrah? I think that is what the
Sure.
majority of what people are mad about is coming back to. And you and I have talked about the fact that sounds like the definitions being used, yours was contextual, and most people aren't taking it as contextual,
I yes, and
which we've clarified.
I understand, but I also, if
Mhm.
somebody's going to make a claim like this and say all the stuff like
Mhm.
that, they should actually claim how I was being disrespectful and not just say that, how dare you not respect people. Um,
I,
it,
I think
it
I
should
think
still be
people at this point
substantiated at that point, don't you
I
think?
think people at this point are taking it as self-evident given the context of the post that this was made on, because this was made in response to those things. So this doesn't need an example if the example is contextualized the same way that your interpretation of the word respect, you don't feel needed to be, you thought it was self-evident based off of the context of the things above.
Sure. I think you're giving a lot of leeway into Joker Factor's position, but I I
I can't
I
speak to it
appreciate that
directly. All
as
I can
far
say
as
is make assumptions based off of
that's
what I've seen in the community.
and that yeah, and that's fine. And I personally think that just the general idea that I might think something different or think that God has a bigger plan for your life, I think that in general people have just hopped on and attacked.
Mhm.
But uh,
I agree.
if this is I don't think
I,
this was part. This was definitely not part of like that thread. It was brought up in response to the video, and so I would kind of harp the whole respect thing back to something I said in the video, which
mhm.
was like nothing at all disrespectful, and that's
Mhm.
why I would say like I would want an example. But you keep bringing it back to like that one tweet, which wasn't commented on hardly at all, besides like that one thread. So I think you're giving, and you're giving me a tough position, which I enjoy. Like I can defend this position. It's fine. But um,
But
but
but that's the only
I don't I get that's the only thing you could really look back to and claim that that's what I was
right.
being disrespectful about. But I don't think this is actually what it's talking about. I think the term respect is being inflated completely here, and that's kind of indicative of a lot of the positions and just the general actions that have been spoken about against me. It's not they don't
How do you mean that the term respect is being conflated?
if I am not willing to take somebody at their word as far as like who they are, what they claim to be, that kind of stuff, and I would like to have a deeper conversation and get to know them in a more deeper level and be like, okay, you can say these things, we could have a discussion, which I've claimed a lot of different ways. People just say you're being disrespectful, and it's very like if you're not on my team, you're disrespectful. You're the problem, and that's basically what I've gotten. And I know we haven't gone through
Mhm.
like any personal attacks or stuff like that in this specific conversation, but
Mhm.
those are weaved in and out of this entirely. People have been
Mhm.
supporting those personal attacks against me, so I think there's a lot more that
I
goes into
agree.
this than we've just talked about. And this isn't all
Of
just in
course.
line with that one conversation. This is all in response to a very polite and respectful video that I put out that people then
Mhm.
attacked the video for. It wasn't even about that specific Twitter conversation, even though that's where it all stemmed from.
The video references and links to the Twitter conversation, and people's frustration with the video, in my understanding, and I believe there's comments later down about it, is that you don't disagree with the things that were said in your Twitter conversation. So it does go back to the Twitter conversation. And I think, again, it comes back to that specific point of being about respect and the definition thereof. and people's concern, whether it's rightful or not, whether there's ever been example other than that one thing that seems to be somewhat semantical. uh, I think it comes back to that, and people are scared that if you're saying that they don't trans people and LGBTQ plus people don't deserve respect, allowing that sort of rhetoric in a community is dangerous. The certain people for their beliefs or who they are or whatever don't deserve respect, and I think you're feeling that yourself, and that's the fear that they have. And to your point, there's some uh, cyclical issues here of hypocrisy on on that part. But I think that's where a lot of this comes from. And you're right, this is in response to the video, but I think the video referencing the tweet and that being really the only example I can come up with is why I keep coming back to it, because I don't see much else personally.
Yeah, and I think that's why you, for this conversation, could go back to it. And when I've asked people to clarify, they don't they don't quote that tweet. They don't do any of that. They go, it's all hateful in its entirety, the whole sentiment, everything about it. And I go, can you be more specific? And they go, nope, and they run away. And that's just that's how my interactions with people have gone. I've never had one interaction that hasn't gone that way. I've never had one person quote this tweet that you keep quoting, which I think is fine if you want to say it all stems from that, but I think it's like a whole nother thing. I think that you specifically can go back to it and whatnot for the sake of this conversation, but for the sentiment of the community as a whole, I don't think that is very indicative. I think that it's more of like,
you feel that there's a bandwagon effect here, and
yeah,
things are being said that you feel a way that you don't feel there is much evidence, and you don't think other people are looking for the evidence, but rather taking other people's word for this is what you've been saying, and this is how I
yeah,
should feel about it, and how I should be acting towards Mark.
yeah. He said
Okay,
something that wasn't totally on
and
my
I'm betting,
team, therefore I'm going to bandwagon against him, and everything I say is justified regardless of how
and I'm
hurtful or
betting that
deep it
there is
is.
I'm betting there is a substantial group of people that that's the case for. But I can't, there's no healing from that, right? Because there's no truth. So I don't want to talk about that, because there's, all I can do is give everybody the benefit of the doubt that that there is some hurt here, and try and understand the hurt and try and see if it's justified. So far, it sounds like that might not be the case based off of you and I's conversation here. And I think you've gotten a lot more hate than you have ever shown in any capacity, to a point that is kind of gross. But that is, my opinion on this, and I don't have a horse in the game. I have family members who identify outside of the straight cis, but that's not me. So, it's a straight white man talking to a straight white man. Good old every podcast ever. So, maybe somebody else within this community needs to be willing to come out and say what above that tweet says what you're being accused of. And I think that's what you're asking for
Yeah.
is, other than that one example that Meader keeps bringing up, what else have I done? Because I can explain that example. I'm not trying to say they don't deserve respect or they're not humans, they're subhuman. I just don't think it's in the Bible, and I don't think it fits with what the Bible teaches, which is your truth.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to speak to Libs of TikTok? Is that something that you like all their things, and that you're a giant fan of theirs and all of their teachings and ideologies, or is that a thing that you followed at some point and don't really pay attention to?
It's something that I followed. And they post mostly about a lot of misdoings that are in our society as far as like political stuff, and also like in schools. If I actually went on their page, like I think it was yesterday, but it's like everything that you see is about people posting like porn in kids' public libraries at school and justifying it under LGBTQ stuff, and that's not okay. And I think everybody can say that that's not okay. If that's not what you stand for, but but I think people are told that this is somebody who like speaks against the ideology, they do, but they also post about how it's being pushed into like public domain and really inappropriately to kids, expressing sexual preferences and stuff to elementary school kids. Like that's not cool. And
Hmm.
people completely ignore that side of it. And it's like I keep up with politics. I follow a couple other people on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter a lot, so I don't really follow a ton of Twitter politics. But that's Libs of TikTok is one that does point out that stuff, and those are the ones that get all the traction and the ones that I will end up seeing eventually. Um,
Hmm.
there was one recently that it was literally that. It was literally like there was a book that had pornographic imagery, and it was in like an elementary school, and the dean of the school or whoever he was like, no, I think that's okay. And it's like, whoa,
Hmm.
bro, like that's not okay. Like the people who are like on the side of LGBTQ and stuff, like you should not be condoning this stuff. Like that's I think
Hmm.
I think you have to look past the veil of like he's not agreeing with me in like it's holistic totality, therefore he's against me. I think that's a lot of sentiment that is actually goes around, and you have to look past that. Like if you want to be a holistic person, you have to look past that and actually see like how things are being applied. And I think uh, that's just Lives at TikTok is like one of the accounts that does that and gets a lot of hate because they're not just totally on board, but you got to look past that. Like I follow people and listen to people's opinions who hate Christians. Like I think a lot of people in this community kind of hate the Christian viewpoint, and like I'm not. I don't condone that, but I'll probably follow them on Twitter, like see their speedrun achievements. Like it goes both ways. Like I don't understand where all the hate from that stuff comes from. Like it's who you follow on Twitter is not who you are as a person. Like, and I don't I think that's important.
Hmm.
And
Who
there's
who you
there's
follow on Twitter definitely does showcase what sort of media and interpersonal communication you consume. So I think if somebody followed 50 Nazi accounts only, there might be some implications that can be or inferences that can be made there that wouldn't be unreasonable. Um,
sure.
and I'm not conflating, Libs of TikTok to Nazis or anything along those lines. Honestly, I don't know much about Libs of TikTok. Um, but I guess that is the only point I'm making. But your point is you're not just following Libs of TikTok only. You're following a wide range because you want a wide range of views.
Yeah, pretty much. And I get all the perspectives and range of views for most of the people in the speedrun community. Like a lot of people
Hmm.
talk about politics on their side. Um, I don't understand why it's such a terrible idea to look at what the other side says too. Um, I I don't know. I think that's very fair, and I think people. I mean, people scoured my Twitter for anything and everything that they could point to, and they brought up like three accounts. They brought up like Tim Pool, they brought up this one, and they brought up somebody else, and I was like, you got three follows. Like, I'm a terrible person because I follow these three people, and I follow like 100 trans and gay people. Like,
Hmm.
where is your weight system coming from? Like, it's crazy. Like, people were looking for a reason to hate me. They couldn't find anything logistically, so they said you follow these two or three people, and therefore you're a bad person. One person. So once this all started, and I started getting a ton of hate. One of the first people to like post and say something in my defense, it was like, "Yo, this isn't cool. Like, we'll invite you to our scene." Was Christian Goku, and I was like, "Oh, cool, thanks, man." And I like dropped him a follow and didn't even think about it. And it was brought up that like he actually kind of goes around and like spreads hate, and I looked into it more, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what like this dude does, and I unfollowed him. I was like, especially like you have the word Christian in your name. I kind of just assumed that like you had the Christian viewpoint of
Hmm.
like you should meet people where they're at. That was not the case, and I did unfollow that person.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's I mean people scoured and looked for any and every reason to hate me, and this was just one of them. And I don't know. It kind of just speaks to what I was talking about earlier. Like people are just looking for a reason to hate. They hate my viewpoint, and the same criteria they use against me is not kind of used in the light, in reverse. Like they don't look at themselves in that way. Like it would be horrible and terrible if I said something negative towards a gay or trans person, but it's totally okay for them to say something terrible and horrible towards a Christian or something that they view and disagree
Mhm.
with. And it's just not, I mean, the weight of these two things are just not taken equally. And I think that's a big problem, especially in this scene. And I think a lot of people are getting bullied into silence when it comes to this kind of stuff, because it's like, oh, if I say anything, even if I, don't completely agree with everything, I'm going to get dogpiled on. I'm going to get called a bunch of slurs. I'm going to be slandered. And that's not an okay way to run a community. And that's what's being
Mhm.
exemplified in my case, I believe. And I could bring up cases to prove that. And it's just like, yeah, it's fine. It's in the name of defending gay and trans people, so therefore, it's everything being said here is okay, and
Mhm.
that's not cool. Like, that's not okay. That's not how you help people become better people. That's not how you get people to have a more holistic viewpoint on life. That's not how you introduce them to ideas that they might have not have known of and might actually change their perspective and their opinion on certain things. Like
Mhm.
it's
I
not,
agree. It's not becoming of the community, of the
yeah,
individuals, and it is not constructive in any way. And the only way it could be helpful is in showing support for somebody, but showing support for one by degrading another, I don't think is the right way to handle those situations. But
yeah. And I
just
think,
to
but I
wrap up the
But I think this tweet exemplifies that in a lot of different ways. Like, and like I said, even in our conversation, like nothing that he really brought up here was brought up in the conversation. So
Yep.
I don't find
Which
it
is
to be
why I
a,
wanted to have this, because I did feel that conversation to be a bit lacking to I think it was great interpersonally for you and him, but I don't think it fulfilled the need of the community to actually understand where you're coming from, um, unless they were willing to actually hear what you were saying without taking their preconceived notions into effect. But to wrap up for Libs of TikTok, JTuber says Libs of TikTok regularly facilitates bomb threats to elementary schools with queer staff. Now him following the account doesn't automatically make him as worse as the account holder, but you also don't follow people like that for the love of God. Can you speak to, do you condone bomb threats to elementary schools with queer staff?
that I know exactly what this is talking about because
Mm-hmm.
I saw a YouTube video talking about this, but
Yep.
they like they retweeted somebody's a video that somebody had put out. I guess like a queer staff member of that school, and somebody um somebody had, like, I guess put a bomb threat or some kind of death threat onto that
Mm-hmm.
school. Obviously I don't condone that. That's horrible behavior, but I also think it's a little
Yep.
disingenuous to say that Lives of TikTok condones that behavior too. um they're
Regularly facilitates.
Yeah, that's not true, and
Okay.
that's not what I've seen. And I would
Mm-hmm.
love for him to bring up that
If
specific
it
example.
was, if it was true, would you heavily reconsidering your follow of Libs of TikTok
Yeah,
if you knew that they were doing that? Okay.
yeah. If
So
somebody's
let's
condoning
move
that
forward
type
then.
of stuff, yeah, it's not okay.
Fleegar says, to be honest, it's extremely hard for me to figure out who's right here without you clarifying what your beliefs are, which we've been trying to do right here. I will say at least that I didn't see anything obviously problematic in your tweets, like which ideology do you disagree with? How does it affect how you treat LGBT people? If you say they deserve punishment, and I did edit this a little to make it easier to read, or you misgender or convert them, then that's hate intolerance. I wouldn't accept it. If you say you think it's sinful, i.e., a deity would punish it, then I'd tolerate your belief. It comes down to whether you yourself accept LGBT people as people without inciting hate. I think that final sentence is what should be responded to here because it kind of summarizes. Do you accept LGBT people as people without inciting hate?
Of course, we're all people, and you know, just because people disagree with certain ideologies or beliefs doesn't mean that you shouldn't treat them as lesser than.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Just because I follow
Um,
the Bible doesn't mean I should be treated lesser than anyone else either. So it goes both ways.
Juggling Geek says, you believe you have the right to be to your transphobic beliefs because of your religion. You say as much in your video. Putting to one side the ethics of your beliefs, how is this compatible with being a commentator in a community featuring trans people on a practical level? How would you commentate a run or event featuring a trans person without either dead naming, misgendering them, or compromising your religious beliefs? Seems entirely appropriate that GSA have fired you. You need to understand why your views are transphobic and do better. The beginning and end kind of suck, but the middle portion I think are reasonable questions, and I'd love for you to answer them. And I think that we should also consider your last 4 years in doing exactly this as the proof of what you will say. So, how is it compatible your beliefs for how God views transgender people and gay people with being a commentator in a community featuring that type of people on a practical level, and would it affect how you commentate them? Um, are you able to not compromise your belief while still commentating for them in this community?
Yeah. So the Bible doesn't tell us that we should completely discommunicate people from society just because they don't follow Christian beliefs. We should love them as they are, for where they are, and we should lead as the example as to how to live a godly and fulfilling life. Christian viewpoint, and in my personal experience, the closer that I live my life to how the Bible teaches, my relationship with God, praying every day, humbling myself, putting God above everything, including my position in the Mario community. That is how important my relationship with God is. And the more I do that, the more peace and fulfillment and meaning I find in life. And I wish that for everyone else as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people can say that. If how many people could you say felt at peace and deep meaning after being completely exiled from a community that you've been with for 4 years and you've done so much for and you've put so much time and effort into. I can say that because the God that I believe in and have a relationship with is bigger and greater than all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really
So,
important thing to highlight here. But I wouldn't. But like, yeah, you meet people where they're at. You love them for who they are, which is a person that God created who has feelings and emotions and goes through experience like life. Like life's a messy game, and in terms of like how would you not disrespect them? I mean, you just use their gamer name. We all have gamer names. Like nobody uses their real life name. Dead naming is not an issue here. And I don't know how it would be.
so your answer for how would you commentate a run or event featuring a trans person without dead naming or misgendering them? And your answer is by not using genders.
Yeah, and most commentators don't. It
Okay.
becomes confusing. You use their name when being specific, and when you're not being specific, you just say they, and that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the reasons that GSA doesn't really put pronouns on the screen anymore is because like nobody was using them. Like it's all
Mm-hmm.
they and specific names, and it just became kind of cluster on the screen, which I think it definitely can be just
Mm-hmm.
something extra to put on the screen. But
So
ultimately, we're
Shran,
here. Sorry.
no, please. I
Oh,
I do. I know we have a time limit, and I just want to try and get to all of them. We're coming to the Milo stuff, which I think is very important. But
mm-hmm.
if you're not finished with the thought, it's very important that you have the time to finish it.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say I think it all comes back to the fact that we're all here to play Mario at the end of the day. We're not here to affirm each other's beliefs on how we view the world,
Mm-hmm.
which is how I've conducted myself. And I think others should do the same towards me. So I don't see an issue here.
So to me, the way that you would commentate on those runs or events with people um who you disagree with on this would be by not by still respecting them.
Yeah,
Using their name, I think is reasonable.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Shrando Shrando says, "What if someone went around saying that they believe it isn't valid to be black, it isn't valid to change your image, or it isn't good to change your body to help yourself, whether that be trans surgery, life-saving drugs, or even cancer treatment? You see how any of these instances, no matter your reasoning, it feels like you're dismissing their entire life, respectful or not. Does not seem like you're out there to cause pain or harm, but no matter what your goal is or how you act, if you're actively against what the large chunk of the community believes in or actively is, then it's going to impact them. Not only does keeping you on the team allow for the trans to be hurt, but it opens the gates to allow more stuff in, whether that be from you or them, reducing the standards and letting more people in with harmful views. Thank you to this community for being as inclusive as possible. Um,
Yeah, I think there's an
so
implicit idea that, uh, my views are harmful, which is, I think we've discussed at length that I don't see how they're harmful towards people. But what's your specific
um,
question?
that is what I'm reading here to understand the crux of what they're saying here. You're
As
not
far
out to
as
cause pain or harm, but no matter what your goal is or how you act, if you're actively against, are you actively against the these people? I mean, I don't know that I agree with their statement of if you disagree, if the statement here is if you disagree with what people believe, then you should be kicked off the team. I don't agree with that. If their statement here is if you are actively making people feel unwelcome, I do disagree with that. I mean, I do agree with that, and that would be a person to not include in the community. And um, I don't feel that you have done anything to make people feel to that would warrant that. I feel it has been done to you, but that's why we're talking, because I feel that there's been an injustice towards you in some regards, and wanted to fully understand where you were coming from. So I guess I don't have a question. I guess I just wanted to speak on this as a whole and say I think they are kind of doing what you've said some people have been doing, in saying if you don't agree with us, then you're against us 100%. And I don't feel that that's how you are. But again, if I'm misreading that, then please let me know so that I can understand better where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, I think
Um,
that's accurate. I think that's basically what this comment is getting towards.
mhm,
Is like, yeah, you don't you view the world differently than we view the world. Therefore, uh, you're causing people harm.
mhm,
You're condoning hate in the community, which is not true at all. Like a lot of like, there's so many claims in here. Like you have to substantiate them. Like this is why you need to be more specific.
mhm.
Like a lot of things are just vague accusations, and I'm like, okay, can you be more specific? No, I can't. You're a horrible person. Bye. And that's all you. That's all I've been getting. It's
The you said at one point, and I believe it was in response to Juggle Geek,
oh
the
no, this
term
was a response to Seabeard when he
Oh, okay.
retweeted
The
my
term
video.
phobic is not true. I'm assuming you were translating, quote, God has made you in his image and has an ultimate purpose for you and loves you, quote, end quote, as the term unacceptable, which is also misleading. Trying to peg people as an enemy when they are not phobic.
When they
Um,
are not an enemy is phobic.
when they trying to peg people as an enemy when they are not is phobic. So you're saying you're not transphobic, you just have a different opinion on how God views trans and homosexual people.
Uh, so I mean, this was trying to correct Seabeard's original tweet, but he's been very public about just being like, this dude's entire idea and philosophy is total hatred and just totally unacceptable. We should excommunicate him, and he's been kind of leading that charge. So he was one of the first people to retweet the video,
Yep.
and basically just made a bunch of accusations saying just that. Didn't substantiate any of them. I've tried to ask him to substantiate. He's not willing to. He actually called in the YouTube comments. He like called me to repentance towards the LGBTQ community for my general ideas,
Hmm.
which is kind of interesting. How he's taking the repentance point of view,
Hmm.
which is kind of the Christian point of view. And I don't know. It's very very strange comment to make, but yeah. So I was just correcting basically how he was trying to misrepresent me, and not that it was doing any good in the grand scheme because people didn't really care anyway. But
Okay.
that's where this is coming from. It's not trying to make any specific statement. It's just trying to clarify what I already clarified in the video, which is like, hey, like I have a different worldview. I think ultimately, God knows best. He's the ultimate creator. He's omniscient, and he has made us. He has made us as spirits of mindful people in bodies, and there is a certain way to conduct ourselves to promote prosperity and peace within us, and it lays that out in the Bible. And I ultimately I don't agree with the ideology that somebody should kind of going back to the beginning of the last comment. Isn't valid to change your image. Trans surgery, life-saving drugs. Life-saving drugs mean I assume this is talking about hormones, but like I believe that God's purpose is greater than that surgery, is greater than those drugs. Cancer treatment is kind of an inflation, because you don't just believe you have cancer, then you get cancer treatments. But God, I mean, God's ultimate purpose and love for us is greater than all of those things, and that's been my experience. I mean, I've had my own difficulties in life and thoughts and experiences, and I'm not a perfect person. I don't claim to be, and that's why we need God ultimately. So that's just my position, and people can take it as it is. They can love me or hate me, but I'm not gonna bow to the hate or to the misrepresentation of anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I can go exactly from this, but I don't spread hate. I do love people for where they are. I do invite everyone to tournaments, and I don't just like speak against people like you're gay. Oh my gosh, you're a horrible person. Like no, I've never said anything like that. I've always been nice and kind and tried to lead by example. And if you're willing to talk about this stuff, like hey, why does God say this kind of stuff in the Bible? And it's like, oh, it doesn't produce prosperity in a long term and internal peace. Ultimately, humans have an end to their desires, and if you've like changed yourself in like really deep, meaningful way, like taking hormones or puberty blockers, that and like your body doesn't just recover from that. Like the woman takes male hormones and her voice deepens, and then she stops taking those hormones, her voice is never going to go back to what it was. Like there are permanent responsibilities to these things like that happen. And if everyone in the world was gay, there would be no more children. Like we would not live to another generation. Like things would go downhill quickly if we just stopped having kids. So I mean there are reasons for this, and I think it goes on to how you live a good life eternally, which is ultimately what we're going to do. And so there's some big implications to this. It's not just about I want to feel good, I want to do what makes me happy. It's like, hey, society, there are ways to conduct yourself to promote a healthy society that generates prosperity and longevity throughout eternity. And to a certain degree, you have to acknowledge that. And people don't. They just say, I can do whatever I want, which is fine. Then you're going to live a life of trying to fulfill your own happiness and in ways that ultimately leave a hole, and you're going to have to keep filling that hole. And God's saying you don't have to do that. You can just stop and breathe and be who you are, and I will fill that hole for you, and you don't have to keep filling it. I will maintain that fulfillment in you. So that's what I believe.
So I think a big crux of the issue here that people have is that it's, from their perspective at minimum, it's not a belief that they the gender dysphoria. That's their reality, in the same way that people say that you believe in God and let that decide everything for you, and you say because it's my truth. So when you say people who have cancer and get cancer treatment, or if they had some medical deformity when they were born and they get that fixed, like a lot of people would say, well, why is that okay to act upon? Would that not be part of God's plan if that's how God made them? Is me wearing glasses hypocrisy?
Well, so
But
there's official
versus
medical reasons
versus
and testable things to those things. I
mhm.
think that's the difference. Like I
but
can
what you're
scientifically
saying is
test
that
those
what
things.
right, but what you're saying is that your belief in God has greater value than their belief in how they're feeling with their dysphoria.
How how is it greater? What do you mean?
Because you're saying they're wrong and you're right.
And I'm sorry, I'm trying to compare it back to this. Are you
Hmm.
trying to make a new statement? A new question?
No. No. So you said God has made you in his image and has an ultimate purpose and loves you.
Yes.
And you're saying that it's not okay for you to change your outer appearance to fit what's inside of you.
Okay, yes. Yeah, if you I mean, if you attempt to get surgery to fulfill a personal feeling about yourself, um
Hmm.
I don't think there's any evidence to claim that that actually produces fulfillment. I think people could say that they're happier and stuff like that, but I don't know of anything that actually shows that. I think in terms of like glasses and cancer, like we can test, we can see that somebody has cancer. I can't see that a male is now a female just because they say that they are. And if you want to get surgery because of that, I don't get cancer treatment because I tell the doctor I have cancer. He tests for that and says you do or you don't.
Hmm.
And you would need something equivalent to say that okay, surgery is now required. And also it's also stated that like uh you know a trans person is trans because they say they are, they don't need the surgery, so then why would you get the surgery? Does the surgery bring some sort of extra validity towards the idea that you are what you're claiming to be? So I mean there's a lot of deep philosophical questions you could ask here,
Hmm.
but ultimately it's like, you know, would I condone somebody like forever changing their body because they claim they claim to be female when they're biologically male? Should they like surgically alter their body to fulfill that feeling? Um, I
Hmm.
I I don't think people should be doing things that change themselves forever, um, unless you have some sort of like actual way to test that that's going to bring you fulfillment, that's actually going to change your life in a meaningful way, that's actually going to produce prosperity. Uh, there you need a reason to alter somebody like that. So what if I said I would be better without my right hand, and I said chop it off, doc. Take
Hmm.
my right hand. I don't want it anymore. I identify as a
Hmm.
left-handed person only. I don't want this right. Would you be like, yo, take it off? Take off his like why are you being such a bigot? Take off that right hand. Like I don't.
You as a consenting adult, yeah, I have no problem with you cutting off your hand.
You think, man,
Why
that's
why would I? That's not my journey. That's not my place to say whether that's your journey or not. That's between you and God. It has nothing to do with me. So I don't have a horse in that race. And I can't say whether your reality that you're experiencing is true or not. Only you can with your walk with
you.
God. So
You believe my reality is that
whether
I'm a left-handed person only. I don't need my right
it could
hands.
be, I don't know. I'm not in your reality. I'm only in my own reality.
I. What is reality?
Reality is completely subjective to yourself and it's also a shared experience that's objective to everybody.
You
It's
can't,
like joining
something
it's
can't
like
be
join
something can't be objective and subjective at the same time. It's
100% it can. Absolutely.
I mean, what?
Reality is a good example of that.
So you can have experiences that are
Yeah.
subjective to you, but ultimate
Yeah.
reality, I don't think is subjective. Like that's why we have science. Like science isn't a subjective field of study.
But it is to a degree.
Are you talking about like psychology?
I'm talking about a lot of different things, but the point being, regardless of, like, I am not in your body. I don't have right to say whether what you're doing is or isn't right by any degree. My own personal beliefs, or I mean, I wouldn't do that, but I'm not you. So, like, to me, it doesn't matter what decisions you make in that regard, as long as you're not hurting other people, and as long, like, it's up to you to walk with God the way you feel fit to do so. And I can't say whether there is a medical reason for gender dysphoria, or any given thing that people can experience that we can't physically see. Depression, all of these things. Like we take things to alter ourselves when things don't feel right, and whether that's your walk with God or not is it's not for me to say. All I can do is try and listen and help you understand yourself better. And I think that's where I come from in regards to that is it's not my place to say what your reality is or isn't. That's your place to say, and that's your personal walk with God.
So, keeping with the hand analogy, if I came to you and
Mm-hmm.
said, "Dude, I'm really struggling mentally. I hate my right
Mm-hmm.
hand,"
Mm-hmm.
you would tell me that maybe you should chop it off.
No, I would ask
Maybe
you
that,
questions and we'd have a conversation.
but if I said, "Look, I just want to get rid of it. Like, I'm going to get rid of
Mm-hmm.
this thing," you wouldn't tell me that, like, "Hey, that's not a good long term play. Like, this is feelings are generally temporary. You can get over feelings. You're never going to get over the loss of your right hand. You're going to lose it forever."
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the opposite could be true, right? You could cut off your hand and then actually feel fulfilled in that and live a solid, good life of happiness and no longer be depressed and suicidal. Or you could end up not because somebody talked you out of it and convinced you that you were going to hell if that's the case and you had eternal damnation, and then live your entire life in absolute horror or end up uh, committing suicide at an earlier age or all sorts of different things. So that that's not on me to make that decision. I am not. That is, God will show them, and if they're leading them to me, I'm here to listen and talk that through. But it's not for me to decide whether that is an okay thing in general or not. That is between them and God.
I think that relinquishes a lot of responsibility we have for each other. Um, so like, I mean, if somebody's hurting, you should try to help them. And if
Mm-hmm.
if you can see like say a homeless person on the side of the road who's like mentally ill and they're wandering around and they
Mm-hmm.
might get hit by a car. You go over there and you go, "Hey, let me help you. You're in a dangerous place. I need to get you to safety." And they go, "No, no, I know exactly where I'm at. I can do it all myself." You'd go, "Fine," and you'd walk away and you'd watch them get hit by a car. Like, I mean, it's kind of this.
Maybe.
It's kind of the same analogy. I think that's horrible. I think that's a terrible way to live. Like, we should be
Yeah.
helping each other. We should help each other find fulfillment. And if you're gonna do something that's gonna cause you permanent harm, like getting hit by a car or like, wanting to chop off your hand, like that's a real condition people have. Like people like
Mm-hmm.
actually start to hate like parts of their body, like their arm or their leg or something, and they want it cut off. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's a real thing, and that's like a serious decision based on something it is a measurable difference of
Mm-hmm.
how you're going to live the rest of your life versus an immeasurable feeling that you have in the moment, or maybe
But
maybe
you're
even the
you're
last.
assuming that that is a moment and not the entirety of their existence.
So
You're saying that this is fleeting. This too shall pass, and like that's not necessarily the truth for everybody.
I don't see any evidence of the contrary. I think a lot of people who have disconnects, like mental disconnects like that. I think
Mm-hmm.
the reason we have psychologists even is so we can get
Mm-hmm.
over those mental disconnects that we have over what is objectively real. I don't think everyone
Mm-hmm.
has like their own reality that's all perfectly valid. I don't see any sort of evidence for that. I think if that was true, psychology would be a complete like witchcraft type study. You just do whatever you want. Tell them however they feel is fine. And I mean, if they want to have tons of sex with everybody, um, and that's not being fulfilling, but they want to keep having sex, you should show them how to have more sex. Like that's not what we see in psychology. We have studies of like certain behaviors that actually lead towards fulfilling lifestyles and people having meaning in their life, and that's what psychologists do. And I
But
think
I'm not
telling people, I
suggesting
think
that.
I think telling people that their feelings are justified and hey, maybe this permanent altering decision, maybe that'll fix you. I think telling somebody
Mm-hmm.
they need to be fixed in that sort of way is like really, really damaging to people's psyche. Like, hey, I
I
feel I
I'm
feel
not
some
suggesting that I would tell them that.
well, not that you would tell them that, but you're affirming that idea. You're like, yeah, maybe something
I'm
is
not
wrong with
affirming
you.
that idea either. I'm just
You
not
are.
refuting it either.
That's the same thing. So the
It's
opposite.
not. It's not.
It is. It is. So
Okay.
if you watch somebody do something evil and you don't do anything, that's
Uh-huh.
called the banality of evil. And
But it's not. But it's not evil.
it is. It is actually
It's
like it's
it's
equally
not
it
though.
is equally evil because the only thing
Do
evil needs to do to succeed is for good people to do nothing.
to do nothing. But what you're turning me saying I would listen and talk with somebody and have conversation and try and understand them and where they are and where they're coming from and help them understand themselves and what they want and believe and what their walk is, as letting people do whatever they want, including evil things. And I think this is a dangerous slope that has caused people to feel certain ways about you, that when we're talking about something like somebody having gender affirming care, whether that be medically or psychologically, and then you're saying, well, if you let people do evil things, people are going to make the assumption that you're saying having gender affirming care in some way is evil.
Okay,
And like that's different. I'm not saying I'm letting people push other people into traffic. I'm saying it that I can try and steer people away from it, but I can't control everybody. And I don't want to. That's not my job.
sure, it's not your job to control everybody, but you should do your best to steer them in a direction that leads
Yeah,
to
I
a
would totally
prosperous
offer
life.
I would totally offer for that person to, hey, do you need somewhere to do you need me to get you somewhere? I can take you to a hospital. I can take you somewhere where you can be safe. I can offer that, but I cannot force somebody to do something because that's not right.
So what if you called the cops and they did it
Mhm.
and they forced her off the road?
Mhm.
Is that a good thing to do, or you should just let her get hit by the car?
I personally I don't think the cops would be the right people to handle that situation. I think that's a medical issue, and I think that's a whole other
Well,
topic.
surgeons don't come to the side of the
But
road and get
well,
people off the
I
road.
wouldn't have a
That's
surgeon
what
come.
cops
I
do.
wouldn't have a surgeon
So
come.
cops do that and then take them to the proper people. But like cops are the
Uh-huh.
ones who you would
Okay.
call in this instance.
Then yeah, I might.
You might.
Absolutely.
I mean, then you're forcing your will onto them by
No.
your own standard.
No.
You
Then
are.
I'm letting them come and handle how they see fit as a professional in that stance.
But you called them.
I see your point. Yeah. Yeah, I might not. I don't know. It would
You
depend on how the conversation goes with them. If I feel that they're completely unable to make consensual decisions, that would be one thing. But regardless of that, I think we've gotten a bit from the original point of just not, if somebody comes to me with a problem, I'm not necessarily saying immediately offering a solution, but rather just listening and trying not to say that how that my walk with God and my life should be how they run theirs. And that I can't say what their reality is. And if somebody is feeling a torturous reality, who am I to tell them straight up, well, if you try and relieve yourself of that torture, you are you're going to be eternally damned and God is going to hate that.
I'm not
I don't
saying
know.
I'm not
Mhm.
saying that. I also think the God damns you to hell idea comes from uh, higher ups in the church trying to control people into doing what doing what
Mhm.
they want to do by giving them like a
I
super
agree.
negative consequence. I think the idea of hell in this instance is apart from God, and God
Yeah.
says all the time in the Bible like he will give you over to your desires if you refuse to acknowledge him or even attempt to walk with him.
Mhm.
He's not going to come in and like yank you along. He's going to be like, well, if that's what you want to
100%.
do, I'm going to let you do that. And I think
And he
that
does it a lot.
ultimately, I think,
He lets entire peoples do that
yeah,
and stray, and then they suffer the consequences of those
yeah, and
actions.
ultimately that leads to hell. That's the whole idea
Mhm.
of Christianity and in the afterlife. I
Mhm.
mean, we're all going to experience an afterlife, and if you've given yourself over to these desires, you're going to be subject to them in the afterlife, and that's going to be hell. Ultimately, it's not
Mhm.
going to lead to eternal prosperity like it is in heaven. That's what I was talking about as far as like, you
Mhm.
know, be like acting and in the things that bring prosperity and life, like marriage and having a child within marriage and then raising that child, like that brings about a society that is not stricken with anxiety, and they have a better, deeper belief of who they are as a person, and they're able to like work through all the things they need to during as childhood and the puberty. Like, I mean, statistically, that's just true across the board.
I
And,
will want to see some evidence of that.
two
I haven't
parent
researched that to.
two parent
Mhm,
households, man and a woman in the house. You
mhm,
need feminine and masculine to for
mhm,
to raise a child properly. Um, that, I mean, that's all. I mean, you could look that up pretty easily. It's all
mhm,
very well documented. I mean, the biggest thing that leads to prosperity in somebody's life is having a father figure in their life. Um, it's, I mean, it's like massive. Like the amount of people in like who commit crimes and stuff like that, and who don't have a proper masculine head, who don't have a father in the home. I mean, it's massive, and that's what actually leads to like way more crime than we've ever seen, and
mhm,
people living a life that is ultimately devoid of meaning. They don't understand how to navigate certain situations. But I think, I mean, I think we do to some degree have a responsibility to help other people in navigating life's like really harsh realities. And I think
mhm,
part of the reason why we're here and doing that is to prepare us for the next life. And if you're unwilling to let yourself and your personal desires go in
mhm,
favor of what does bring prosperity, you will ultimately lead yourself to hell. And
mhm,
that is what, I mean, the totality of the Bible teaches. The Bible doesn't even talk about hell that often. It's very
mhm,
few instances, and nobody ever asked to leave hell. No, they're not weeping and crying, um, because they're in hell. They're weeping and crying because God is not. They're not under God's protection, and they are subject to what they hold most high. But nobody's denying that. Nobody's changing their ways. Nobody's doing any of
mhm,
that. God is leaving them to their own desires that they put ahead of Him.
mhm,
That's the whole idea. Um,
mhm,
and so we do have a responsibility to some degree to promote these good ideas that lead to prosperity and
mhm,
and ultimately meaning, which is deep satisfaction. It's not just satisfaction of the moments; it's actually meaning in
mhm,
life. And I don't think telling somebody that they need to surgically alter their body to have that meaning is very good. I don't think
mhm,
scientifically that anything shows that it does produce meaning in your life.
mhm,
And not only that, but it's a permanent decision. Even
mhm,
like the hormones, like I mentioned earlier, like they have permanent effects before or after puberty.
mhm,
And so, telling people that, hey, maybe you do just need to permanently alter yourself to have any sort of meaning in your
mhm.
life. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's
Did I
really
say that though?
no, but that's the idea that's being encouraged and being
Mhm,
led on. I'm not saying that you're saying anything like that, but that's the general idea.
mhm,
Like, hey, you shouldn't speak against these things because somebody, maybe they do need to surgically alter themselves to find meaning. And I don't think that at all. I
mhm,
think they have everything that they need at their disposal. And if
mhm,
nobody ever tells them that, no telling what they're going to do, listening to everyone else who says maybe you should do these permanently altering things to find
mhm,
fulfillment that you actually have at your own fingertips and don't need any of that. Um,
mhm,
they're never going to know. And so to a certain degree, like, you are responsible, which is why you should be willing to have these conversations. And I think we can appreciate the actions of having these conversations and stuff more than we can appreciate the reasons why we need to have them, which is kind of where we
mhm.
are, where we are in current society. But
So, as far as empirical evidence goes, if empirical evidence came out over enough time that concluded that trans people feeling accepted and normal around their loved ones, peers, and societies would significantly lower the suicide rates in the trans community and objectively lead to them living longer, happier lives, which you're saying there is no evidence right now. If it did exist, would you reconsider your position?
yes, but I think things in that area need to be defined as well. And it's like, okay, so if
Mhm,
if trans people are committing suicide at a rate of 40% now, well, if we accept everybody, if we accept them for who they are, now it's 29%. Therefore,
Mhm.
everyone should accept them. It's like, wait a minute, people are still killing themselves at a rate of like 29%. Isn't there still
Mhm.
there's still an issue here? Like other people aren't doing that. I think there's like such a deeper meaning here.
Is that not a significant amount enough of people not dying
I would like it to be
to
zero.
support that?
I would
I
like it to
mean,
be like
yeah,
zero.
that's the dream, right? But they're not. That's not
I
realistic
like exact zero.
because
I don't think
right
anyone can
now it's
reach
not.
exact zero cannot be reached. But like Christians don't kill themselves in mass rates like trans people do. Like that's and it's
Mhm.
they like even me like I don't I've been completely discommunicated from the scene pretty much as of right
Mhm.
now. I don't think it would be appropriate to kill myself if somebody who
But
was
it's not zero. So
it is zero. Like well, so I don't think it
the
will
rate of
ever.
Christians committing
It's
suicide is not zero either.
it's certainly
So,
less than 1%, which is like way
but
different than 40% and 30% and 20% and 10%.
would that not say though? This seems like a weird stance to take. Would that not say though, with empirical evidence, objectively stating that this is helpful, that it was helpful, and maybe they need actually more help as well, and there's other things we can do, but it's good that we did this one thing at minimum.
It would yeah it would so it would suggest that like you helped people in a small sense, but
Hmm.
what would help them in a bigger sense? Like
Yeah, I think that's
as
an
far as what
awesome
I
question.
understand, this is like the only thing that you can do. There's nothing else you can do other than tell people that what they're doing is perfectly fine. And if you know
Hmm.
you would have to show like a significant change down to like 10%, which is the rate that Christians kill themselves. So I don't think it's
Hmm.
unreasonable to expect that from other communities if nothing is wrong. Um,
That's to me, that's a bit wild.
if a community
I'm
if a
not
community of
necessarily saying nothing is wrong. I'm saying that if you see a drastic decrease, to then say like, well, it's not good enough, so it's not worth doing is wild. And I'm
I
hoping that's not what you're
that's
saying.
not what I'm saying. I don't
You're
think
just
you've
saying
fixed
that
the
they're
problem. You haven't actually done any. Yeah, you haven't finished the job. But as of right now, that's the only thing you can do is tell these people that there's nothing wrong with them and they should continue on to potentially surgery, which is the ultimate
and
goal.
I mean,
If you have the money to do surgery, you're kind of told like, hey, why
you
not?
believe that there is nothing wrong with them, correct?
I think there's something wrong with all of us personally, but
Right, but I mean nothing wrong with them more or less than any other person.
correct. But if
Right.
you're saying
So
what they're doing to find fulfillment, there's nothing wrong with that. And they're
all I would be saying is that it's not for me to make that decision. That is a you decision, and I'm happy to talk it through with you, and we can explore all of your options if I can be helpful to you in that way.
same.
But I wouldn't take anything off the table either, because that's not my decision to make to take that off the table. You're a consenting adult. You can make those decisions yourself.
I th- I think it's
The
just
same,
very tricky. I think it's a slippery slope. Like I said, like it,
yeah. I mean,
you have to
we made
define
this
like where it
disagreement.
actually finds meaning. Like you have to display like how is this actually helping somebody?
But
Like
there's no way for me to know that. It's only for that person to know that. And I can't tell them what is or isn't going to have meaning or have a lasting impact on them. That is a thing that they need to understand for themselves. And I'm not saying that drop of the hat I would say make a long-term decision, but rather consider all your options and think about it and pray on it and what feels right and what does God say, all of those things. And if
yeah.
that ends up leading them away from it, then it does, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But I have done my part of putting forward that here's how you should handle trouble in your life, and then they have to make that decision. If I force them to make a decision, they didn't make a decision. I
So
made a decision.
so are you saying that you would try to discourage it, but if ultimately they wouldn't, then it's their choice?
No, I wouldn't try and discourage it any more than I would try and discourage any other option that they had other than completely killing themselves. That would be the
Okay.
only
But that's their but
objective
according to you, like
option that
isn't
I
that
would
their
have.
choice? isn't that? I mean, if
I
there's no
mean,
meaning, then I mean, isn't that just their choice? What's wrong with that?
it ultimately it is, and I can't force them not to. And if I did, then that would be a pointless and meaningless life. Like that's not I I uh I can't refute that.
So I mean,
But
so like, so why would you
I would
dissuade
discourage
somebody?
against it
So why? I mean, but why? I mean, isn't that you trying to
because
control them, according to what you've
to a
already said?
to a degree, yeah.
So why is that
Yeah,
okay? Then everything else is not.
because that's what feels right to me and my walk with God.
So if you said,
And yeah, it's hypocritical. I don't disagree with you. You make a valid point, it is. But I think that there's a drastic line between uh telling them to reconsider or to consider all of their options but not suicide versus telling them that this is the right decision.
okay, so I'm gonna return your original question back onto you.
Mm-hmm.
If it showed that dissuading people from the idea that they are not in the right body and they need to, you know, have surgery or hormones to change themselves in order to be more in the right body, if it was shown that dissuading them from making that decision actually lowered the suicide rate, would you dissuade? Would you start dissuading people, or would you still say that it's
If
their choice?
if it significantly lowered the suicide rates and objectively led to them living longer, happier lives, then I I would have a hard time finding a way to disagree with that.
Yeah. How do you
I
define
would
like significant? Like I made the point of like 10%. Like if it went from
Mhm.
40 to 30, like is that significant?
Yeah. I think 10% of a whole group of people is a significant amount of people.
So
Yeah.
is the
I think it's a start.
is the other 30% just like sort out of luck?
No. I I don't think that there's only one solution to every problem. I think that like if there's a wildfire, you cut it off so it doesn't spread, and then you can address the fire and try and save what you can. But I don't think it makes sense to say if I can't save it all, fuck it all. Let's burn the whole lot. That's throwing the baby out with
No.
the
Yeah,
bathwater, and it doesn't make sense.
I don't think that
Yeah,
either. But I also don't think
but I
I've
think if you're taking 10% of something and you're able to save it, then you can say, okay, that 10% save, let's focus on the next percent and work your way down to that 1%, 0%. We don't put enough focus on mental health and we don't put enough focus on understanding each other and all of these things that you're talking about too.
yeah.
Having these conversations, putting religion and psychology and all of these things together and saying, how can we as a people be better as a people and live happier lives and do so without feeling the need to kill ourselves? And it's growing at a rapid rate that needs to be addressed. But I think if we can find a way to chip away at it, yeah, I'm not going to turn that down, whether it be for or against.
Yeah. I don't I think if it was
Mm-hmm.
actually proven that like this did help, 10% of people to kill themselves at a, 10% less rate, then
Mm-hmm.
I think there would definitely be validity to that. But I would say that's not enough. I'd say what about the other 30%? And it
Mm-hmm.
seems like you're saying that's what it would be too, but that would be step number 2. That wouldn't be part of step number 1.
I would say, why throw out that 10%?
Right.
I agree it's not enough, but I would still say, okay, let's take action on that and then let's keep going because we're not there yet.
Right. So
Do you have time to bust through
I
these
would be
last three
I'd
as
be
quick as
similar.
possible?
Yeah, I would be similar. But,
Uh,
but yeah, let's do it.
Milo said to respond to the video's title, which the title of your video was Fired for Believing and Defending Jesus and His Teachings. I want to reiterate again that you weren't fired for your beliefs. We just can't have you representing our community events when you publicly put yourself against someone who is supporting trans people. Essentially saying they shouldn't if they want to call themselves Catholic. This boils down to you not listening to LGBTQ plus community when they tell you your idea of loving is doing more harm to them than good. You won't listen to them because of your faith, and they won't listen to you because of their reality, as much as you disagree on what that reality is. To which you replied, my religion is my reality. It sounds like you don't understand that. Um, and I did not see a response at that point. Um, So they Milo feels that he doesn't want you representing the community because you have put yourself against someone supporting trans people and calling themselves Catholic, saying they can't do both. Do you agree with the statement that you can't be Catholic and support trans people, knowing that you're going to ask me to define support?
Yes, and it does come down to the definition of support,
Mhm,
because this was also talked about in the Joker factor
mhm,
conversation, because that, I mean, that's a big definition. I asked him to define like a bunch of things, and you're much more willing to define what you mean and have the actual discussion.
mhm,
But I said I would certainly, like, if they needed food, I would feed them. If they needed clothes, I would clothe them.
mhm,
If they needed a place to stay, I would do my best to help them out. I'm not a rich person, so as far as getting them a hotel room, I don't know how much I could do there, but doing everything that I possibly could,
mhm.
I would, and that to me would be supporting them. But saying that everything that they feel is valid and they should act on it, I don't think that is a good definition of supporting somebody.
Understood. Milo also said in the YouTube comments, feel free to ask Mark to clarify his stance on gender dysphoria and what Christians, Catholics should preach in regards to what to do about it, since I made such an unbelievable misrepresentation of his tweets. I feel there's a bit of frustration on the second half of that, but can you speak to the first half? Can you clarify your stance on gender dysphoria and what Christians and Catholics should preach in regards to what to do about it? I think we've touched on it greatly. Is there any way you can summarize it in a more palatable
More
way?
more clear view without a bunch of examples getting in the way.
Well, yeah, I mean the examples are important, and I get it. But yes, is there a fairly straightforward way to do it?
Yeah, like gender dysphoria, as far as like somebody saying I'm not.
Saying that they have male genitalia, but they don't identify, nothing about them feels male other than those genitalia in their hearts, and it is causing them great distress to have other people viewing them in a way that they don't view themselves.
So I would, as far as addressing this as a Christian, um, first off, you have to meet them where they are. You have to, be nice to them. You can't just go up to them and be like, "You're a problem," and start, announcing everything that you think about them, because you don't know anything about them. You have to talk with them. You have to have a conversation. You have to know how they're doing, what their problems are. And as far as the, that comes more of like the personal side and like the physical side. But as far as what you should do is, for somebody who says that I'm in the wrong body, I know that I'm born male, but you know, I'm born male, but I feel like I'm a female, and if anyone calls me male, then it caused me great harm. Um, you know, ask. I mean, ask them more about that. Be like, what does that mean? I don't understand what that means. And I wish people would be more willing to have this conversation with me, who are trans, so I can understand that a bit more. If I'm being misrepresentative or anything like that. And I think I've tried, but people seem to not be willing to have that conversation, which is pretty saddening to me. But I think understanding them is step number one. I don't think like condoning and saying, well, everything that you're doing is fine, everything that you're feeling is totally 100% valid, because Christians don't tell each other that. I don't think we should tell non-Christians that either. I think that's cohesive in my views. Um, but we should love them for who they are, which is a person and that God created, and we should do everything for them and live as an example. But condoning everything that they believe about themselves, especially without further clarification and understanding, that's not what people should be doing for anybody, not just Christians, for trans people. But like, somebody shouldn't demand that I not be Christian without understanding my personal views, which I think some people have already done on Twitter. But
Mhm. So I want to disagree about one sentence being saying that not all people's feelings are valid. I firmly disagree with that. I
Well,
think
yeah,
all feelings are valid, but maybe not idealistic. Jesus had feelings that were not idealistic. He killed a fig tree for no reason. Like
uh,
that was
well, there was a reason,
it was out of didn't have fruit, but it was also out of season.
but it only had leaves.
Uh-huh.
It didn't have buds like it would need to bear fruit. So
Mhm.
that tree, so the whole story, like that tree was not
Mhm.
going to bear fruit, therefore there's no reason for it to live.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's comes back to how meaning in our lives. If you don't have meaning in your life, there's no reason for you to live. And I think that's why people commit suicide. Ultimately, they need something to fill that void of emptiness that we all have, and you have to fill it with something meaningful. And
Mhm.
that the meaning has to be real. It can't just be temporary, because then you're just like a drug addict at that point, filling with whatever you can, drugs, sex, what
Mhm.
have you. But I mean, it all just comes down to like a deeper understanding of what this all is, and I don't think people are really willing to have that conversation, even with themselves. From what
Mhm.
I've gathered, everything's surface level. You try to ask for definitions, nobody has them, and that's like where do you find meaning in that, in empty definitions and conversations you're unwilling to have, like.
I think people are turned off by the definition thing because I did a podcast with my best friend for like 5 years, and every one of our disagreements always came down to semantics. And every time we defined our terms, it resolved the conflict, and we either agreed to disagree or realized we were saying the same thing and just weren't understanding each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not a lot of people understand that the majority of arguments are semantical. And it is why I think a lot of what has happened stemmed from semantical arguments. I don't think you're wrong that a lot of it has also come from some people virtue signaling and bandwagoning, assuming that here's what happened and then jumping on that bandwagon because they want to support people that they know and love. But I think they're going about it the wrong way. But uh, I mean, I think a lot of people feel that it is a cop out to the conversation because they think the definition is obvious and aren't willing to justify what their definition is because they think it's somebody just being like, well, define everything, every single word in that sentence so that I can then pick it apart. And some people do that, but I think if they entertained that at least with you, they would see that they're not. Maybe there was some disagreement, some misunderstanding. Surely there will be some disagreement. We all have them. You and I have had quite a bit in the last couple hours. Um, but ultimately, I do think it coming down to semantical arguments is not uncommon and it's not bad, but people feel it to be disingenuous for that reason because they think it's self-evident what the word means.
Sure, and yeah, I think people say that. I think that people have an idea of something in their head, and if
Mm-hmm.
like, and they don't quite understand how somebody could think it's something else. And like you said, that's where a lot of
Mm-hmm.
semantical arguments come from.
Yes.
But I think people just kind of take things really lightly. Like I was saying, like they don't really want to look into it to a deeper level. They would rather just say
Mm-hmm.
what they need to say to get along with people because that's what other people are saying. Therefore, who am I to say anything different? I'm just going to go with the flow. But that can lead to some really dangerous areas for people, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, I want everyone to prosper. I want everyone to find actual meaning, some deep inner meaning in your life, and to live prosperously. And one of the like and to have children, even like one of the best things you could do is have a children. I don't have a child yet, but I want one eventually. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, and a lot of these lifestyles, like they don't lead to that, and therefore like you're giving up one of the most meaningful things that you could have in your life for, you know, something that you feel that you are. And like I said earlier, like how do you substantiate that? Like you're giving up measurable things that we like know happen, and for things that are kind of immeasurable. And like you know, the term like my reality keeps coming up, and you said like everyone kind of has their own reality, and then there's the reality that we
Mm-hmm.
share. And And I would agree that we all have our experiences, but
Mhm.
that doesn't equate to reality. That equates to our own experiences. And like you could actually experience something or like see something happen and be wrong. Like if a car crash happens and three people see it and two people explain how it happened, and that's what the video camera footage shows it happened, and that one third person like sees things here and there but wasn't able to comprehend everything as it came through. Like he had an experience, but his story, like it's not cohesive. It's not. So I don't think that everyone's experience is actually indicative to the greater reality that we all share.
But I don't think it either is an invalid
No, I don't think
thing.
it's I don't think it's completely invalid,
Eh,
which is why I hold the position
but
that you should talk and meet people where they are and
Mhm.
have these conversations, which I'm totally willing to have. I wish I could have more of them with the people who claim all these mean, terrible things about me, but somehow
Mhm.
those are the people who refuse to have them, which is
Mhm.
also, I think, somewhat indicative of the mentality towards this, which is like, I'm just going to say what makes me feel right. I'm not going to actually look into it much deeper. But these things have like actual real world and lifelong consequences to them that I don't
Mhm.
think people are really taking seriously.
But
Um,
that's why those people weren't on this list, because I don't think they had validity in the things they were saying. I think they were statements of either ignorance or passion that weren't worth talking about, which is why I only put forth things that I felt were worth us discussing. Um, because those claims of just being mean for the sake of showing other people that you support them aren't valid.
yeah. Well, it's not just being mean for the sake of being mean. It's like actually like looking at a deeper level at things. And I mean, the original question was about dysphoria and what I think about people who have dysphoria. I really feel for you. I can't imagine what it would it be like to think that I needed to live in a completely separate kind of way to have fulfillment or meaning in my life. Like that's a really hard place to navigate, and I would like to navigate that more. But to tell me that I have to like accommodate and validate everything that they tell me about themselves without any sort of validation back, like I don't think that's
Mhm.
appropriate either. So like it kind of leaves us in this weird middle ground where I'm just being told I'm a bad person, but I don't know why or how.
Mhm.
I just want the best. I want meaning in your life. I want you to feel fulfilled. I don't want you to feel like you need to surgically alter yourself to fulfill you. Like I don't like plastic surgery anyway. I don't like somebody who thinks they need a nose job. Like
Mhm.
ultimately, I don't think that's a good thing either. Ultimately, it's somewhat benign, but I think it leads to the next step, which is a butt job, and the next step, which is a boob job, with the next step, which is like really altering your like your
That's the
cheek,
classic
and
order.
like
Nose,
yeah,
butt, boobs.
but like it's like, well, if I could do this, I could do that, and I could do that, and that, and that, and that, and it leads down a hole. And it's like, wait, why do you think you need to do that to begin with?
Mhm.
What do you think this brings you? What fulfillment does this bring you? And ultimately, you get to looking like I mean, you see all these celebrities who are like 70 years old with all this plastic surgery, and it's like they don't look good, man. Like
Mhm.
they look like they're really like struggling in life, and they've
Mhm.
looked for all of these validations outside of their life and to other people, and other people are telling them like, yeah, maybe you do just need to surgically alter yourself, and I don't think
Mhm.
that's ultimately led them to a good place. And I think
Mhm.
that is ultimately where I stand. I want you to ultimately be in a good place, but I don't see how this is getting you there. And
Mhm.
this is a lifestyle that people are encouraging, life altering decisions that will
Mhm.
affect you for your entire life, and they're not willing to have these conversations or to be like, hey, why do you feel this way? Well, because I do just feel this way. It's who I am. Well, how do you know you are that way? But even asking these questions, people will just call you a bigot or a hater, and it's like, yo, I
Mhm.
I I I want the best for you in a much bigger way than a lot of these Twitter people want the best for you.
Mhm.
They want to feel included for themselves. I think a lot of people go along with this for selfish reasons. I'm standing up for what I think for completely non-selfish reasons. If I was a selfish and hateful person, I would just be like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like I don't care if you destroy your life. I'm going to commentate Mario 64. Well, if that's
Mhm.
what I need to give up in order to like tell you that like I'm here willing to talk to you and not make you feel like a terrible awful person, but I'm
Mhm.
not going to sit here and tell you that everything you're doing is perfectly fine.
Mhm.
You need somebody like that in your life. Like that's what your parents are supposed to be there for. and to guide you through life in a certain way and to listen to you. And every parent falls short in that to a certain degree. But like I'm not here to hate you. I'm not here to to dog you for anything that you've done or feel or anything like that. I genuinely want you to have deep and fulfilling meaning in your life, and ultimately, I think the Bible has the answers to that. And I don't think validating everyone just to get along with them is the way.
Hmm.
So like
I
that.
disagree with a couple things you said, but I don't think we have the time to deep dive. I think the overarching of what you're saying, I can respect that you love people and believe that part of that is disagreeing with them when you feel that they're not heading towards what will bring them true happiness, um, especially in permanent decisions. So I can respect that. Um, I just yeah. We won't. We've circled around it plenty. I'll read the final message here. So, pulling back the curtain a bit, I had a private conversation with Milo, the head of GSA, because I was concerned if I had this conversation with you, that it could uh, invalidate me as well. It wasn't necessarily a deciding factor on whether I would or not. I wanted to have this conversation regardless, but I was interested in his take on it. And I also reached out to GSA, I mean to SRC, through
Speed
a support ticket because I don't know how. Go ahead.
Yeah, speedrun.com. Just
Yeah, because I don't know how else to get a hold of them, or who runs it or anything. So I opened a support ticket and I let them know that there was a part. I was trying to read through the rules to find the answer, and I let them know, hey, there's a section on your moderation rules page that leads to the general site rules, and it goes to a dead link. So I had to like scrub to find the site rules, and I eventually found them. But in regards to somebody, the reason I was doing it was because Markinator was banned, and I want to understand what the explanation of the why, because I don't fully understand it. I don't think that you were at the hate speech level of things, with what I saw. And is there something I'm missing, or how can I avoid myself getting in that? I don't want this conversation where I agree with some of the things you say and disagree with some of them to be considered hate speech, because that's obviously what neither of us are trying to do. I have not gotten a response in the last 5 days. I'm sure they get a lot of stuff. They don't owe me a response. They may never respond, and that's their right. But yeah, I did get response from Milo. Um and uh the biggest thing he said, I asked him what could be done to try and bridge the gap here. And he said, as for what Mark could do to start making things better, it's still the same thing Cheese and I told him privately before he made his video: to apologize to the community for implying trans people are confused and need to turn to God to stop feeling gender dysphoria, that he understands there's a difference between gender roles and the biology you were born with, and that he accepts how people identify and express themselves. So let's start there. And well, actually, I'll finish reading it. And so I tried to summarize it, and he said, well, to be clear, it's not that he's against allowing others to express themselves how he see fits, because he made it clear that in his eyes, it's up to God to judge what is and isn't allowed. It's that he's publicly stating it's not what God wants, implying it's wrong, since he says we should all turn towards God. And to us in private, he said, according to his faith, all decisions either lead towards life or death, and that the trans ideology, an idea of self acceptance, leads towards death because it strays away from how God designs you, which I think you have reiterated here today. But if you don't agree with all of that, feel free to walk us through that.
yeah, I'm just trying to read back through it. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a lot. So apologize to the community for implying trans people are confused and need to turn to God to stop feeling gender dysphoria. Um, that wasn't necessarily a statement that I said. I think God is
That's
where
yeah,
we.
that's why he said implying. I think it could be equally said that there was some inference by some people, but to make it clear so there's no imply or inference, Do you feel trans people are confused and need to turn to God to stop feeling gender dysphoria?
I mean, the gender dysphoria as a general term, it kind of implies that, but it's not that they're confused necessarily. It's that their internal self, like sense of self, is in conflict with their external self, which is their biology. And I think there's um I don't think the answer to that is a flat you should change your external biology and demand others like completely agree with you. I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that's the answer to anything in life necessarily. So like I said, I'd like to have more discussions about this with people who disagree. But like I said, I mean, there's deeper implications to all of this, which is what I generally disagree with. If those implications weren't there, then there would be no issues. But
Do you feel that turning to God is the only way to overcome gender dysphoria?
no, not
Which I
necessarily.
don't disagree is a, by definition, um, and maybe confused isn't the best word, but there's a dysphoria between, like, within you. There's turmoil within you. Do you feel that God turning to God is the only way to overcome that?
I don't necessarily think it's the only way, but I think everybody should turn to God because I think He's the ultimate creator of the universe and
Okay.
morals and values and all
And
that sense of stuff.
when when you say turn to God, just to put a bow on it, because I mean I'm okay with a yes, depending what the definition of turn to God is, as far as whether I agree with you or not. Um, what how do you define turning to God?
Seeking absolute truth morally and spiritually, as well as physically. I mean,
And how do you do that?
by praying. I think that if you call out to God, and it's not going to be this one time thing, God definitely enjoys some sort sense of perseverance. So it's not just like a test of God. You're not just like, well, I'm going to say this one thing. If He doesn't come to me this one instance, then I'm just going to screw the whole thing. I think that's more of like, I'm going to test God, and if He doesn't do what I say, then therefore He's not real. I don't think that's a good way to go about it. But to truly seek what is out there, what truth is out there, where like call outs to you don't I would encourage to call out to Jesus to reveal Himself to you, but you could also do it in a more general sense of calling out to God in prayer, and out loud is better than internally. I mean, you don't necessarily have to do it outside, but you could do it internally if you really wanted to. But some sort of perseverance of seeking to know more truth, and where it ultimately comes from. Like, God, if you are the ultimate truth, please reveal yourself to me. I want to feel okay. I want to know where everything stems from, and I want to live according to what is true and what is right. And calling out something like that, seeking what is ultimately true and ultimately right, is like the best way to start. And if you're truly open to that, and you're not just trying to test God to like prove that He doesn't exist, um, I think that he will reveal Himself to you, and then you have a next step of like seeking down the line. But that's definitely the first step.
Do
That's how you
you
turn to God.
do you see a situation where turning to God in that way and praying, God revealing themselves and them praying on this turmoil and them coming to the conclusion still that gender affirming surgery or care in some way is right for them? Do you see those two things ever happening in that way? That you
Um,
could pray on it and that could still be the outcome? And I don't know is
I
legit too.
yeah, I
You don't
don't
know, you don't
ultimately I
know
don't
everything.
know. Yeah, ultimately I do not
Mhm.
know what the exact answer is, but seeking the Lord and seeking ultimate truth and guidance, for your soul, for your spirit, and ultimately how you
Mhm.
should walk in alignment with that. That is how you seek God. And if somebody comes back and says, I did that, it doesn't work, I wouldn't encourage them to stop. I would encourage them to keep going. in addition to whatever else they're gonna do. But I would also encourage them to seek, why they think all of this is where they ultimately stand. I've stated a couple times, I've tried to ask people to clarify. I've tried to ask people to have this conversation, and people seem to not want to. They seem to run away from it, and I think that's a really bad place. And ultimately, I think kind of demanding that I affirm them is a plea towards those outside of you to give yourself recognition. And I think that in and of itself is bad to do. You should not be seeking others for recognition. I don't seek other people in this community for my recognition. My recognition comes from God, and that is more than enough for me, which is why I am perfectly fine in the state that I am, whether I'm able to come back to commentary in the Mario scene or not. I ultimately have peace and understanding of where I stand. And if you're demanding that somebody affirm you, I think you're claiming that you don't have that, and you need, and if that is, if somebody who's not affirming you is ultimately making you feel unsafe and potentially kill yourself, which is what I've been told that's what that means. I feel unsafe. I feel emotionally unstable to a certain degree, and I might kill myself. If me not affirming you, not affirming your beliefs, take you to that spot, I think you really need to seek where it is you actually stand, and where the meaning that you're seeking, where that lies, and where it takes you. Because you humans need a deep sense of meaning and understanding in their life. And if you're telling other people that they have to say that there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, there's an admission there that you don't have that deeper meaning that you really need, and you're seeking it in others. Does that make sense?
I mean, I understand what you're saying and where you come from. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't have to. We don't have to
Yeah.
agree. That's life.
I think it's
Um,
most important to be at a place where you don't need other people to feel at peace and affirmed in who you are. I'm affirmed in who I am because I have a relationship with God, and I know where I stand. And I think others should seek the same.
mhm. Do you understand, or what is your understanding on the difference between gender roles and the biology that we are born with?
Um, Gender roles and biology, they actually do have a pretty tight correlation as far as what I understand. I think there have been studies done specifically in Sweden. If it's not Sweden, it's another Nordic country. But they actually have, they had like the most liberal laws according to gender, and they didn't push anything onto people. And when that happened, like females actually took a greater female role, and males took a greater male role. And so as far as like gender roles as we see them. And so I think that so there is a correlation between the two, but I also understand that there's a lot of nuance there. um, and as far as the correlation, what was the rest of the question?
I mean, that was it. Just understanding the difference between the two.
Oh, difference between the
Um,
gender roles, or like gender and what you're born with.
there's a difference between gender roles and the biology you were born with.
Okay. I don't think people have like specific gender roles necessarily. I think there are tendencies, statistical tendencies, for
Mhm.
males and females. Like males build houses and they work construction, and there are some females who do that, but it's like very low percentages. And so it's not that those people are not female because they are in that industry, but I mean there are areas where males dominate, there are areas where females dominate, and I don't think that we should force any sort of one way or the other, but we should allow people to fall where they may in that instance. If,
Okay.
so that's where I stand with like the whole
D-
roles.
Do you accept how people identify and express themselves?
So ask it again. What?
Yep. Um, do you accept how people identify and express themselves?
Um, you have to define accept. Do
Mhm.
I?
Well, let's. let's define it with in two major ways. Do
Yeah.
you condone it actively?
Um,
I'm guessing your answer is going to be no.
condone. I kind of forgot the exact original question. We've gone so many
Yep. Do
places.
you condone and 100% get behind and cheerlead for those, for however people identify and express themselves? And in specific, we're talking about trans and LGBTQIA plus community.
Um, do I totally condone the way that people express themselves? Um, that's how they express themselves. Condone.
My guess after
Not
this
in its.
conversation is no in that
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out.
statement.
I'm trying to. That's like a really tough question. I don't think
Mhm.
it. I don't think. Man, I don't condone anything on the surface level necessarily, but I do think that that people find fulfillment in certain roles. But I wouldn't just blanket condone somebody because they told me something. Like I
Mhm.
don't condone witchcraft because somebody told me they're a witch. I don't
Mhm.
condone a male saying it's okay for a male to surgically alter themselves because they tell me that they're a female. Like I need something deeper
Mhm.
than that.
Mhm. Do you how about the inverse? Do you actively what's the word for the opposite of condone? Um denounce maybe? Those who how people identify and express themselves within those communities.
Do I denounce the way that they express themselves?
Mhm.
Is that the
Are
question?
you are you are you uh like juxtaposed to them and their identity and expression? Are you actively against them
Well, so now you
to
just
the point that you're like I'm trying to suss out the word accepts, and to do so we're pretty much going to need to go through all the ways it could be taken.
Yeah, I know it
um
is, and it's tough. That's why this conversation is
it
tough
is
because people like kind of speak in generalities, and then
it
if
is
you're not explicitly on the side they want you to be, they kind of bring up every
Yeah,
negative
which
thing
is
that accept could mean. But yeah, it's
which is
tough.
why I want to be super specific, and why I want you to say it directly and not people to have to assume
Yeah,
what you mean by it.
it's even tough to
But
extrapolate it.
yeah, I mean, do you are you against those people in some way?
No,
You
I'm not
just
against them in any sort of way. I 100% want the best for them. Absolutely.
okay. Are you unwilling to allow uh to propagate from what they think forward? Are you unwilling, like, using their, if somebody says that they want to use, if I said I wanted to use she pronouns when I'm male presenting, does that, are you completely unwilling to do that?
Um, I've done that here and there in the past. Again, I try to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, I'll just use their name and I'll just give them a hug and
Mm-hmm.
say that I'm happy to see you. And
Mm-hmm.
I try just to meet people where they are, and I don't
That
again
sounds like a yes.
I need
It sounds like I find loopholes is your answer.
I don't explicitly condone it because I need, like I said, I need something deeper to know that like a male who claims they're a female is actually a female, and that's what the because that's what those terms mean. Like like you use he and him for males, and you use she and her for females. And if you're telling me to use the other one, I need something to grasp onto. I need something deeper than just your word because that's a really big part of like who we are as humans and how you get treatment is like at the doctor's office. Even like if you put on a doctor's note that you're she her and they bring out medicine that's specifically for females and they go, wait a minute,
So as
are
a
they
doctor, no. But how about
well
as a commentator?
as a commentator, I use names, and when I'm being specific and when I'm not being
Mhm.
specific I say they.
Hmm.
That's just how it is. I think that's good in general because people use gamer names, and a lot of times you don't even know if somebody's a male or a female based on their gamer name. So I think it's
Hmm.
just the easiest way to go about it. You see a lot of things when you're a commentator, and to try to get pronouns perfectly correct all the time is something that you kind of
Hmm.
just don't want to worry about.
Hmm.
But if just in normal everyday life, it's not something that I explicitly practice as far as like calling calling people by their preferred pronouns. It's not something that I.
But how? I guess I genuinely don't understand why that matters to you personally. How do you know what I was biologically born as? And why does it matter so much to you that I use the same pronouns that I was born with, to the point that you're not willing to use a different word to refer to me if that was the case?
Because it gets back into everything that we already talked about, like because the idea is that you are a female, which has like some real world implications that I need something deeper than just your word. And me calling you she when you're biologically a male is a step in that direction. And I would rather, I need something more than just your word to believe that you are a female. And I understand the term like,
But aren't you taking my word in the first place that I'm a male asking to be called a female? Or are you doing a cup check on everybody you meet?
it's,
Like, what if I
you,
what if I what if I have female genitalia and I've been asking you to call me he? Like, how would you know the difference?
uh,
Like, why would that make a difference to you in any way?
because it's asking me to express something that I don't necessarily believe,
Is it
and I
is
think
it not?
leads, and I think lead, and you're asking me to engage in an action that condones something that leads to real world implications. So
What are
it's
the
basically step
implications
one of
that
the
that
it's step one of the
calling me
slippery slope is
what are the
basically what it
implications
is.
that calling me she instead of he leads to?
Um, at like basically it's leads to everything that we've already talked about. It leads to you thinking that I condone everything that you do, and that's not the case. It's not what I believe, and it's asking me to like basically claim something that I don't believe. It's like I don't like. What if I asked you? Because I identify as a Christian. That's how I deeply identify. Just
Hmm.
like people deeply identify being trans.
Yes.
Um, if I asked you basically to affirm the fact that I'm saved by Christ every time that I had a conversation with you, and
Hmm.
you didn't believe that any of that was real,
Hmm.
would that be a fair thing for me to ask?
Yes. I don't care. If there was a word that I could use to refer to you that denoted something that you feel is a core of who you are and how you identify yourself, I would I would do so. If you changed your name, I would use a different name if you wanted to change your name. I don't
Yeah,
care.
and I
That's
think changing
that's
your name is way
you.
different than changing somebody's your pronouns because, like I said, pronouns indicate something that we have biologically. And you brought up the case. What if you couldn't tell? Well, then you got me. Like, there's nothing I can do there. But
What about somebody who's born without genitalia or hermaphroditic and have both? Which pronouns
well,
should they use?
those people are extremely rare cases, and I know people
Hmm.
say it's not as rare as you think, but
Even if it
the
was one
cases that
person
you're
ever in
actually,
history.
yeah, people like if you're actually in the middle, that's extremely rare. Like typically people with
Hmm.
that condition are like female or male, and they don't even know until like later down the line. But
Hmm.
but uh but like
So
that is like they
genitalia
get to
then isn't
choose. They get to choose.
genitalia then isn't the decider. It's just chromosomes. I guess
I
the
don't
the
know the
point at what
exact
I'm
answer
driving at,
here.
and I mean that's kind of the point I'm driving at, is like, if somebody says to that they're certain pronouns, why not just believe them and use them? And like, whether it's not like, you're not saying I'm affirming that necessarily. You're just saying that's what you told me to call you. The same way if you tell me your name's John and it's Mark, like I'm not condoning that you say your name's John when it's not. That's just what I'm calling you because that's what you asked me to call you.
Yeah, so it's different if it's just a name because names are subjective, and I think names do carry weight, legality wise and stuff like that. It
Mm-hmm.
certainly carries some weight, but it doesn't carry as much weight as like your physical biology that we can like test scientifically and has repercussions of how you're going to experience things into the future. And also, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, it's step one in condoning everything else that we're talking about, which leads to very real world applications. And I don't think it's fair to demand somebody condone all of that, which is basically what is going on. Just like if you thought Christianity um, led to people committing suicide, or
Mm-hmm.
it led to somebody not having any deeper meaning in your life, um,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, well, you have to affirm the fact that I'm a Christian and saved by Christ every time that you
Mm-hmm.
met me, and you thought that that was
Mm-hmm.
actually something that led people down a dangerous road of real world implications with nothing more than a feeling and an idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that'd be a fair thing for me to ask you.
Okay.
And if you don't think that God is real, or that Jesus Christ lived on earth or anything like that, like I don't demand that you say that he did. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, but the reverse, it seems, is not the same. And if you
But
don't,
you're saying that gender and identity are extremely important.
yes.
So would it not make sense and track then that they would want to be referred to as this important thing to them?
uh why does it matter that I refer to them in that manner and not just use their name? Why does
For this,
it goes back to seeking affirmation in others to bring yourself fulfillment, which is not something you should be doing.
I personally don't have issue with you avoiding using pronouns altogether in favor of names and they, because I typically use they as well when I'm speaking of people in the community unless I explicitly know. Um, because like you said, when you're in commentary, you're talking a lot and you're trying to think of the next thing to say. You're listening to your co-commentator, trying to play off of it, trying to react to things, trying to have meaningful conversation that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to like think of all of the intricacies and not make mistakes that are going to then make people feel like they've been completely disrespected. But I don't have issue with that as a whole. I'm just trying to understand your thought process behind why it matters so much to you to tell somebody else what gender they are constantly in rather than use the one that they ask you to use. Um, like
because
why that is important to you.
because it is demanding that I affirm an idea that has real world implications, and has could if what everyone says is true and you have the money to do it, go have surgery, go alter yourself forever. And that, I mean, it's just step one down the line. And I don't think forcing someone to engage in that is fair. And if you don't think that Christianity is the right way somebody should live and it leads to hate, if that's what you think, then I don't think demanding that every time I converse with you that you condone my Christian faith. Like I just don't think that's a fair thing to ask somebody. You know,
Okay.
and with everything that we've already stated, um,
Hmm.
that I've already stated, it's I want the ultimate best for you, but you know,
Hmm.
demanding that I condone everything that you tell me just because you tell me, and there's no deeper meaning, and like biology is like a big deal. It leads to a lot of different things, and it ultimately, you need a male and a female to have a baby, and that's how we regenerate and produce life down the line. And starting to blur those lines, I don't think is helpful, or brings
I
meaning
don't
to
I don't
people.
see why having a baby is relevant. Like I just if
Well, you're
everybody
blur.
in the world had a baby, we would have an overpopulation problem to the point that we wouldn't be able to live comfortably. So like
That's not true.
Why don't
If everybody had 2 kids, the world would stay the same population.
forever?
Yes.
That is a no. That's a huge uptick. What are you talking
It
about?
takes 2 people to make a baby.
Uh huh.
So if
Uh huh.
everybody had 2 kids,
Uh huh.
2 kids per 2 people,
Mm-hmm.
the it would stay the same.
I'll have to think about that math.
It
I'm
takes
not good
two.
with the off the top of my
It's
head
true.
math.
If
I don't that no, because you're assuming that when 2 people are born, the 2 people who had them die immediately. There's generations.
no,
Okay.
I mean yes, there's generations. I mean it's not like it's not. I mean I mean it would do this to a certain degree as people like were born and died off,
Mm-hmm.
but like yeah no you have 2 parents. It takes
Mm-hmm.
every one person needs another person to have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
If every 2 people had 2 kids,
Mm-hmm.
the
So
population would
you're
stay the same.
so you're saying that we should have a mandate on how many people we can have if
No,
in order to have everybody lead satisfactory lives and have kids.
I don't think there should be any sort of mandate. I haven't suggested any sort of mandate. I've stated that mandating me to do things and
Mm-hmm.
to play into ideas that I don't think ultimately bring meaning and blur lines that are biological and actually we need to regenerate populations. I don't think that's a good game to play and demand that I play as well and to affirm everything that you say because you tell me that you are that and I say okay well can you tell me more about that and you say no you're a hateful person you're not like no that's not how this works like you I need more like people aren't giving me anything like we can have this conversation we could play theoretical games all the time but the people who this actually applies to are not willing to have these conversations they're not willing to talk to people who disagree with them and therefore I think they are looking into the world for their satisfaction and their meaning and that never plays out well and I think that's can directly correlate to anxiety depression and I think it does when you seek outward acceptance or things of the world even drugs and sex and if you need those things to feel fulfilled you need the affirmation of others to feel fulfilled you need something beyond yourself and living a lifestyle like that you ultimately come to an end and when you come to that end if you're too far down that road you can't turn around and then where do you go from there and so that's where all of this stems from and that's the deeper conversation people aren't willing to have they just say well I say that I am therefore you should I am and you should affirm me and if you say anything else then you're being hateful you're promoting people to self-harm and all this and it's like nothing but like inflationary statements people aren't willing to be specific I mean it's very hard to navigate these types of situations because it does automatically get inflated into like the worst possible scenario
Mm-hmm.
but none of my views are one-sided they go both ways I'm willing to have all the conversations I'm willing to be exiled from the scene from the community because I ultimately am comfortable with who I am in my relationship with God and those who are wishing me gone I don't think can say the same, which I think speaks volumes to where they are mentally. And to affirm that place where they are mentally will ultimately lead to some sort of destruction in their life. Not necessarily suicide, but lack of meaning brings all sorts of destructions and mental fatigues and anxiety, depression, all that sorts of stuff. So I don't think demanding I participate in step one and saying there's nothing wrong with it because you can change your name, which is somewhat arbitrary, to I now have to say that a male is possibly a female. Like those lines are not the same. And it does lead to all of this other stuff biologically and emotionally and ultimately spiritually. When you get down to all of it, I think it's where it all stems from. But as far as like everything stems from people's spiritual sense of meaning and purpose.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think we've agreed on a lot of things today. I think we've disagreed on probably more things, but I think it's been in a reasonable way. I would definitely love because I'm going back and reading the Bible and actually listening to it. And I'm only into second Samuel right now, so pretty early. I haven't even
Hmm.
gotten to New Testament stuff.
I
If you have direct stuff from New Testament that supports those statements, that would be awesome. And I'm sure other people would love it if you want to put it in the. I think you said you were going to post this as a video. If you
Yeah,
wanted to put it in there, I bet that would be helpful to people to see where you're coming from. That you're putting your uh, your flag in the Bible and what the New Testament is saying, and you're not cherry picking here and there what you do and don't believe from the Old Testament, but rather following through on what the New Testament and Christ said. Um,
sure. If you want to reference, I'd actually, as you're reading through the Bible, I would recommend that you stop where you are and read the New Testament first, and then go back and read the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is specifically for Jews and Jewish law, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's like really boring, and you don't quite understand if you didn't live and indulge yourself into that culture.
mhm.
But
Yeah, I mean
read,
Leviticus is a slog, man.
yeah,
Leviticus, Numbers, the second half of Exodus, it's brutal.
yeah.
But
But
yeah,
so
no, I'm just gonna go through it
yeah.
forward. But
But
um,
anyway, that would be my
mhm,
recommendation if you did want to read the Bible. Read the New Testament first, read what's more applicable to our lives today, and then go back and
mhm,
read the history of it and see where it all kind of stemmed from. So that's kind of where
mhm,
I would say. But if you want to read it start to finish, you can do that too if that's what you want. But for references as far as what I talk about, what I claim is in the Bible, First Corinthians is a really good one. It talks about immoralities and some translations will just say immoralities. It won't say like sexual immoralities necessarily. But if you actually go into through the words that they use like originally, it is most of it is talking about sexual
mhm.
immorality and how you conduct yourself with other people like that. But
Mhm.
so you just
Would
go,
would you be willing to put it all in the YouTube thing, the description or whatever? It
yeah.
that way other people can do it, and you can gather everything together on one spot. And I do a little better reading directly than hearing it um from like piecemeal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I say First Corinthians, and I don't
Yeah,
necessarily have anything
fair.
super specific after that. But that is a good place to talk. First Corinthians is speaking specifically to a body of
Yeah,
Christ and how they should conduct themselves, and how we should conduct ourselves ultimately as well.
and
But
it's a
yeah,
big dense book, so
it is.
taking the time to gather all of the stuff that um you want to present, I think is very reasonable, not on the fly in a phone call.
Yeah, and I mean I do have like one or two examples just on the fly if you want me to read them, but or if you just want me to keep them in the description, that's fine too. Um, but specifically, First Corinthians 6:9. It says, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals. And I think they extrapolated effeminate and homosexuals from like one word meaning like a male who would prostitute themselves out or to lie with another male. Um, but adulterers, people who have sex outside of marriage, fornicators, it's kind of the same thing. People before they're married who have sex, and so on and so forth. But sexual immorality it covers anything outside of sex with a male and a woman in confines of marriage to support and raising children in a stable home, so your generations are stable as they come up through the years. And that's what I mean. It's all over First Corinthians. There's some stuff in Second Corinthians and a few other places in the Bible that mention it too. But this stuff is in there, and the claim that it's not, and to say that you can kind of just act however you want and it's fine, that's not biblical. And to
Mhm.
kind of demand that I say that it is biblical to act however you want is not it's not cool. And ultimately like leads to some serious like abnegation of faith if you do know what the scripture says. If you know what the scripture says and uh, if I know what the scripture says and you're demanding I say that it says something else, you're demanding that I go against what I know and to abnegate that which I believe. And
Mhm.
that's not I don't ask that of you, and you shouldn't ask that of me.
Mhm.
But I am willing to have these conversations, and I am willing to defend my position in a
Mhm.
totalitarian way, like in a total aspect and in a total perspective, not just like in this one perspective. This person says that they're trans and they want to be called she her, like, do you say yes or no? And nobody, and
Mhm.
this is the one question I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to base everything I know off of this one question. And if you say no, then I'm just going to say that you're a terrible person and that you don't care about anybody. And it's like, bro, this is like such a bigger conversation, and leads to a lot of people's personal lives, and
Mhm.
gratification, and ultimately like relationship with God and where they derive meaning, like we've already talked about in depth. So summarizing it in such a trivial way is demeaning towards what I believe, and think towards the people around you, because I don't think you know what you believe. I don't think you know everything about this, and I don't think the person, like, I don't know everything about everything that I believe and feel and whatnot. And I that's why I need the scriptures to guide me. And even if I don't understand why I need to do it, when I follow it, it never turns out badly for me, like, ever. I've never felt guilty for following the scriptures. Even as I'm being persecuted, I've never been like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. I'm like, oh wow, like, people really hate me for believing in the Bible.
Mhm.
And that's where it ends. Like, I still believe in the Bible, I still derive meaning, and I still have that relationship with God, and that doesn't change. That doesn't go anywhere. And those who don't have that stability, I think, are in some deep water in a small boat, and they need some help. Not, doesn't have to be in the exact way that I believe, but they need to understand and more about what they believe, and not just do things for temporary fulfillment or seek affirmation from others for their fulfillment. And because that comes to an end, you reach an end, and I've reached an end. That's how I know. And like, lots of other people have reached their ends in all different aspects. And you just gotta open yourself up and have these conversations, and be real. And like you said, how does somebody turn to God? How does somebody seek God? Like, call out to just the ultimate power. You don't have to be specific. Just whoever's out there, whoever's in charge, please reveal yourself to me. I need to know what's true. I need to know what it is, and you have to be willing to follow it once he reveals himself to you. Otherwise, you're just seeking your own affirmation, even more so by testing God, and that's not a good thing to do.
Let's put a bow here. So do uh as the blanket term, respect, meaning to not be a dick towards and not just outright try and offend for the sake of offending. Do you respect gay, trans, etc. um people as a whole, as a people?
Absolutely.
Do um do you did Yeah, I mean, I think honestly that covers the majority of things. Are you actively trying to tell everybody that you meet when they say they're trans, oh, you need to seek God, blah blah blah, and the entirety of your your perspective?
No, 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 no. The first,
If they ask for it, are you willing to have a conversation to both understand them and if they'd like to, vice versa?
yes.
And would you welcome those and even find it helpful who are feeling gender dysphoria and either have or haven't transitioned or anywhere along that line, um, to have a conversation with you so you can understand where they're at, in some way? Do
Yeah,
you have anything against?
I would love that. I would really want that. I've been asking people for that, and nobody's taken me up on it.
Mhm.
And like you said, they
Fair
might be
enough.
thinking it's derogatory way, but it's not. I really
Yeah,
do want to know more.
understood. Um, yeah, personally, I think the speedrun.com removal is a bit jumping the shark. I would love to see that removal removed. I'd also love to see, and I think the majority of the buzz has died down, but people stop being dicks to you. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think it's appropriate. Um, I don't think anything you've done is outright hateful. I think you have beliefs that I don't personally agree with fully. I agree with some of the things you say. I disagree with some of the things you say, and I think that's normal and healthy because you're not being a jerk and you're not pushing your beliefs onto other people. you're answering the questions that are being asked of you, and trying to defend the Bible when somebody quotes the Bible and you feel it's incorrect, like you would with anything that is incorrectly being represented. So personally, I don't think you're a bad guy. I don't have any issue with you, and I have seen every time somebody has agreed to talk with you, you just sat with me for 3.5 hours. We've had an hour and a half conversation before this, a different day. You've talked to Joker, you talked to Milo and Cheese. You're willing to talk to people. So I would love to see the SRC ban go away, but that is not my power. I would just hope that anyone who's watching this who does have any pull in that way or is willing to say something, and Mark obviously didn't ask me to say any of this. This is straight from me. I think that that's a bit too far, and it's not a good look for us as a community to get rid of somebody because they had a theological disagreement with somebody, and misrepresented. I think anybody saying that you were implying you don't respect people is what this should resolve that by you explaining what you meant and very clearly saying you do. And I think the 4 years of examples should support that. So those are my feelings on it, and I really appreciate your time. And I know it was really long, so thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having the conversation with me. I really appreciate it, and being willing to talk with me and put the questions out there where there were questions, and give me a chance to answer. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Right on. You got it. Have a good one.
You too.